Everyone knows there are 20 managers in the Premier League, yeah? Well, actually, no. Around 3/4 of them are not managers. The terms manager and head coach are often used interchangeably to describe Premier League bosses, but they're actually two different jobs. So let's explain how and why. For years, fans referred to Mikel Arteta as Arsenal's manager, but I'm afraid technically...
No, I don't think so, no.
From his first day on the job, he was the Gunners' head coach. Let's pick a random moment in time, February 2025. Only 6 Premier League bosses actually held the official title of manager rather than head coach. Man City's Pep Guardiola, David Moyes of Everton, Ipswich boss Kieran McKenna, Southampton's Ivan Juric, Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace and Leicester's Ruud van Nistelrooy were the only actual managers of their respective teams. Everyone else? That's right, head coach, including Ruben Amorim at Man United. He took over from Erik ten Hag, a man who had held the title of manager. Might come as a surprise that Amorim's appointment marked the first time ever that Man United had a head coach instead of a manager. But to understand why they made that decision, you also have to get what the difference is between a head coach and a manager. A manager's got a huge range of responsibilities. They're not just in charge of training and player lineups, they're also heavily involved in player sales and transfers. Critical stuff. But a head coach's role is far more focused on team training and performance on the pitch. So whereas Ten Hag was highly involved with decisions around transfers during his tenure, the intention was that Amorim wouldn't be, at least not on the same level. And as the sporting structure at Man United changed under Sir Jim Ratcliffe, people like Sir Dave Brailsford took charge of transfers instead. How all those roles play out in practice may be slightly different at different clubs though. On the other hand, the contracts of actual managers like Pep or Moyes had no limits on their job role and their involvement with transfers and contracts. But those guys are actually in the minority now, and it's a change that's happened pretty quickly. In 2019, there were only 6 head coaches in the Premier League, but by 2025, there were 14. A clear indication that more and more clubs are moving towards a model where the guy in charge is actually only really in charge on the pitch. And the way things are going, it might not be long before all 20 clubs have got head coaches, and the job position of football manager in the top flight is no more.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Trans-Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and for the next 3 hours, I'm delighted to say, returning from his holiday, no doubt all over the footballing world, Andy Brassell. It's also a bit of a different show for me. First time in the new studios in London. Yep, I'm over in the capital city. So those of you watching on your smart TVs and on YouTube, please forgive my slightly startled expression. I've not worked like this before. No headphones, little earbuds in my ears like dark kids on the tube, and so on and so forth. But of course, I'm loving being here with my colleagues, including, as I say, Andy Brassell, who'll be joining us in just a few moments' time. Among the things we're going to do in the next 3 hours, all the major stories from across the continent. Villarreal against Barcelona is going to be played in Miami. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the new season of Ligue 1 and La Liga, which start this weekend. We'll have Mbappe Watch. Greg Whelan will join us to talk all the latest from Italian football when our club focus will be on Como. Tim Vickery will join us from South America, and we'll have Champions League qualifier reaction, plus a million other things. Welcome one, welcome all, willkommen, bienvenue to Trans-Europe Express. So, Andy, welcome along. Welcome back after 2 weeks on holiday, man.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Yes. Now, look, we can't go into the full details because it was a family holiday. But for once, you didn't manage to persuade any of your family to come to you to obscure football matches on their family holiday.
Thing is, if that's going to happen on a family holiday, I need to manipulate someone else into organising it.
So it can't be your idea, can it?
No, it can't be my idea. So I left it with someone else, and they let the tickets sell out. So never again. I'm going to have to think of an even more dastardly plan for the next family
I should make
holiday.
the point you were in West Africa, so I'm delighted to hear that the tickets sold out, because often in these tournaments, I know there's an international tournament going on over there right now, often in Africa we complain that the tickets, which tend to be priced by FIFA, just stop the locals buying any tickets at all. So hopefully that wasn't what's happening. But Andy, where should we start? I mean, in fact, in the world of international football, why don't we start tonight then with this news that La Liga, unsurprisingly, given that they'd already kind of had the red light or the wink, the green light from FIFA, have approved the idea that next season's league game between, it's this season, isn't it? Later on in the year, between Villarreal and Barcelona will be held in, let's get this right, Miami, USA. I was thinking that the reaction in the rest of Europe was pretty against, but you're saying it was also that in Spain.
Yeah, which I was a little bit surprised about. I mean, we tend to look at where the political pressure is coming from and what has caused this to happen. And clearly in Spain, you think Barcelona are involved. Of course, it's for money. It's always about plugging gaps. It's not just about expansion. It's not just about the future. It's the fact that Barcelona will make between 5 and 6 million for this. If this game, which is just a couple of days before Christmas, is scheduled between Villarreal and Barcelona, happens in Miami in the end, because it's still got a couple of hoops to go through. It's been approved by La Liga and the RFEF, the Spanish FA, not yet by UEFA and FIFA. Of course, FIFA have talked about moderating their rules and relaxing their rules. So it's been seen as it's been seen as a fait accompli, but it's not quite that yet. And because we look at where the desire for this to happen is coming from, I think sometimes we can sort of overlook the fact what might stop it. And the fact is that there is a lot of pressure from within Spain that I wasn't expecting at all. And the reason I wasn't expecting it is you have to bear in mind why Spain was targeted for this in the first place. Is because you do get travelling fans, and you look at Betis in particular, Atletico in certain circumstances, but you don't get travelling fans to the same extent. You don't have the same culture of travelling fans as you do in, say, England or Germany or the Netherlands. Now, part of that is due to scheduling. That's clear, and the scheduling of La Liga fixtures is very rarely taken fans into consideration, and that has been the case. I think less in recent years, but still, it's short notice definition of fixtures on definitive dates and times, and sometimes quite late. So it can be difficult. That contributes to the culture. But of course, when you're looking at moving a product, that makes it easier, doesn't it? If you feel that fans are going to be compliant, that fans aren't going to flip out. If we go back a couple of years to when, like, Arsenal had a game against Leicester moved with 4 weeks notice, and Arsenal and Leicester fans quite justifiably kicked off about it. And I think fans in Spain and Portugal were looking at it going, 4 weeks notice? That's amazing. Imagine 4 weeks notice.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. Now, we saw Fernando Roig, the president of Villarreal, come out this week and said, look, this is our plan. Now, Villarreal stand to make more from it than Barcelona, because they are sacrificing their home game, of course. So they get a little bit of a cherry on top. Now, Fernando Roig, who's done so much to build Villarreal, of course, they were a small regional club until he took over and invested, built the infrastructure, etc. He said, look, if anyone wants to take us up on this, any Villarreal fan, we will send you over there. We'll pay for your travel and we'll pay for your ticket.
Now, sorry to jump in, because that sounds like an extraordinary offer, but often offers like that, if you'll excuse that clunky English sentence, are accompanied by things that people know will not be popular. Because from your own experience, I remember you were telling me about when Wimbledon fans were being tried to be force fed the move to Milton Keynes. Tell us about the offer you got there.
Yeah, so like Fernando Roig said, we'll pay for your ticket and travel, or if you don't want to go, we'll take 20% off your season ticket. And I guess there are neutrals out there going, oh, that's a great deal. That's very thoughtful of him. But actually, it reminded me all over of when Wimbledon officially announced Milton Keynes in summer 2001. Of course, it was ratified in the following year, at the end of the following year, after the independent appeal panel. And we got this letter saying, oh, Milton Keynes is the best thing for the club. And by the way, if you come, you'll get a 90% reduction on season ticket, and you'll get free travel there.
Amazing.
Provided by the club and back. And you read it and you thought, you just don't get it.
Do not understand it, no.
I suspect there are Villarreal fans who think that as well. The fact that their small town has been made into a world name, really, by their football team. Now, look, those fans will be well aware of what Fernando Rogers has done for the club and what his family and what his money has done for the club. But
sure, but he remains a curator rather than a dictator. That's what these owners don't understand.
Exactly. For me, it would hurt a little bit more, because it would be like, well, look, we've taken our little town and we've put it on the map. And we've done it through years of working together.
Organic football progress,
Exactly. And what has surprised me, though, is outside Villarreal, is that other people, and obviously led by Real Madrid.
Well, let me say that, of course, this wouldn't be a proper Spanish story if Barcelona weren't up to something, and Real Madrid, the equally ludicrous Real Madrid, hadn't immediately made almost a piece of poetry to express their sadness and angst at the game being played outside of the country. Whereas, of course, if they'd got the game, what have they been saying, Andy?
Well, that's the question. I mean, look, the letter, the statement said, it sets an unacceptable precedent if it goes to Miami. It's taken without prior information or consultation with the clubs. Javier Tebas, the president of La Liga, has obviously kicked back against this and said, look, we have to discuss this. I tend to think it's better to discuss something before you make the decision, but nevertheless, a Real Madrid statement goes on to say it compromises the legitimacy of the results, opening the door to exceptions based on interests other than the strictly sporting. Now, I don't know about you. I'm looking at that statement thinking, I agree with pretty much all of that. But it's just the motivation of it. Yes. That's what you have to question, really, especially...
Bad faith, Andy, bad faith.
I think so, especially when so many of the economic interests of Barcelona and Real Madrid are aligned. And we've seen that from the fact that they've pushed the Super League on and on and on. So, look, I am really interested to see if this does eventually go through. Obviously, if it does go through, I think what happens next for football is really interesting. Of course, Serie A are working hard on getting a game between AC Milan and Como out in February to Perth in Western Australia. So we have to see if that happens as well.
And, of course, the people who run the Premier League will be going, see, we told you the 39th game was a great idea and all the rest of it. Of course they will. They will never let this thing lie. Now, look, I'm not a Luddite. It may be that there is some possible good in this kind of physical as well as cultural expansion of the game across the globe. I can't see it from a fan's point of view, only from financiers at the moment. Someone else will have to convince me about how it's good for the fans.
While we're on Spain, I've got a goal to tell you about. Of course, there was a 8:30 kickoff between Espanyol and new look Atletico Madrid. 5 debutants in the 11 for them tonight, but it's one of the old guard. Julian Alvarez has put them in front just before half-time. Smashed the right foot shot into the top corner past Marko Dimitrovic. Made a good save just before that to give them the lead.
And there's a slight difference to tonight's version of Trans-Europe Express. When I'm at home in Kilkenny, I've got a massive bank of televisions watching all the football from across the world, all perfectly legally, of course. And I'm telling Andy about the goals. Now, Andy is, because the studio's designed for other things, Andy is telling me all about it. Next up, we'll discuss, how can I put this, Tottenham's triumphant effort to win the European Super Cup and what it means for Donnarumma, who has now become, as we've stated before in this programme, the world's best unwanted footballer. That's next on Trans-Europe Express, where you listen to me, Danny Kelly, and the returning Andy Brassell. Yeah, really enjoying being in the new talkSPORT studios. We're super high tech and very televisual and all the rest of it. But one of the other things I've noticed from not working at home is that I do it in a room where I can tell as the sun goes down what time it is in the programme. Here, of course, it could be 1 o'clock in the morning or mid-afternoon. Very interesting to be cut off from the elements in this way, but not, of course, the worst thing would be to be cut off from Andy Brassell, who's still very much with us here on Trans Europe Express, where Andy, we're going to discuss the Super Cup, which a tournament which I've always derided as being a bit meaningless and a kind of pumped up friendly until it looked like Spurs were going to win it, and suddenly it was a very important trophy and indicative of European power to come. We'll talk about that briefly because we want to really get on to what it means for for Donnarumma. Super Cup itself, I thought, demonstrated two things about Paris Saint-Germain, bearing in mind that they'd had only 7 days to prepare following their adventures in the World Club Championship. Although I don't think Spurs had a pre-season either. Traipsing around the world to play high-profile friendlies is not preparation for a new season, in my opinion. For instance, they played Newcastle in the Far East, then pitched up in Bavaria to play Bayern Munich, then had to go and play the Super Cup final in the run-up to playing their opening game of the Premier League season. That is not correct. I sound like an old man shouting at clouds. These tours are not proper build-up for the new season.
No.
But the Super Cup was between then two teams who were a bit undercooked. And two things I thought about PSG. One, Spurs showed, as I think Chelsea had showed in the Club World Cup final, that you can get after this Paris Saint-Germain team physically, not just pressing, but also tackling. Spurs played 9 defensive players from the start and said, go on then, do your worst. Equally, though, I think it also demonstrated the other side of Paris Saint-Germain, which you saw again and again and again in their run to that fantastic victory over Internazionale in the final of the Champions League. And that was that for all their technical skill, there's a spirit in that squad that says we never, never, never beaten. And without just pressing on the bruise of fans' natural pessimism, once they got the first goal, I knew they'd get a second, even though there were only 7 minutes to go. The game changed utterly and completely. So what is it? But Donnarumma didn't start, wasn't on the bench, isn't going to be there. I mean, Chevalier made that mistake for the second goal. I thought people were going mad about that, Andy. It was an average piece of goalkeeping, the like of which we see 5 times a week in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shock, actually, to those of us who watched Lucas Chevalier for a while, because he doesn't really make mistakes like that. Now, interestingly, of course, Gigi Donnarumma does sometimes, and most goalkeepers do sometimes. Look, no one's denying that Donnarumma is one of the most exceptional shot stoppers in the world, but actually the decision which Luis Enrique, by the way, has taken on his shoulders, he's not said the club want me to get rid of him because he's only got a year left on his contract and we don't want to lose him for nothing, even though that is obviously a huge part of the reason why he's being let out.
He wants a different profile of goalkeeper.
But he always has. He always has. Now, I think it's really interesting that they went out and bought a goalkeeper last summer as well. They bought the Russian Matvey Safonov from Krasnodar, who has been, at best, a qualified success. And, if Gigi Donnarumma is not the best goalkeeper in the world with his feet, Safonov is sort of on the same level, really. So the best goalkeeper that they've got with his feet, certainly before Chevalier turned up, was Arno Tenas, who's the third choice, who came over from Spain when Luis Enrique arrived in the first place, but is considered a bit too young and callow for the role. So, look, I think it's highly dishonest to go, well, Chevalier's made this mistake, therefore they've made a terrible error in letting Donnarumma go. Well, look, ask Angel Correa, ask Harvey Elliott, who are pretty pleased with Donnarumma's efforts against them because he gave them both a Champions League winning goal last season at various stages of the competition. Look, just because, and he was exceptional in their way to winning the Champions League, but every season we have this discussion about a team that's played really well and won the Champions League. Yeah. They can't be improved. And when it gets to February, it turns out, well, actually, they can, and maybe they should have improved, and maybe they should have evolved. And so really it's the ideal time to do it. Even if you park the contractual bit, He's not the goalkeeper that Luis Enrique wanted. I think he's always been fairly clear about that. And just because he did a great job last year, they want to build a dynasty. They don't really want to go into another situation where they're under the cosh for half an hour at Aston Villa, or they're getting pummeled by Arsenal at the Parc des Princes in the second leg, or all those bits that Donnarumma held them out of. And they want to have a control and momentum that doesn't require that.
But you know this, and I know this, and the coaches know it perfectly well as well. The game changes very quickly now and all the time, partially due to computers. I presume artificial intelligence will be the next thing that's involved here, and that is that we want goalkeepers who can play out from the back of their feet. Chelsea and Spurs denied the PSG goalkeeper any chance whatsoever to play the ball out from the back with the way they pressed. So now suddenly what you need is a goalkeeper who can kick the ball 70 yards accurately, because that's what they ended up doing, looking for somebody to head the ball on,
You need both those things, and you probably need Gonzalo Ramos on the end of it to actually make the most of those long balls, don't you?
I mean, we're seeing in the Premier League now, teams are forcing goalkeepers, particularly, to belt the thing, because we've had 5 years now of people playing through the lines, and people are now starting to block those lines. Quite rightly, that's what they're supposed to do.
And funnily enough, Danny, that's why Lucas Perry could be one of the hits of the Premier League season at Leeds. We'll wait and see. But someone who can accurately pass, a goalkeeper who can accurately pass with either foot over 70 yards is gold dust. And if he fulfills 80-90% of his potential, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin's able to stay fit, that'll be a brilliant combination for them. But going back to Donnarumma, I think the stylistic side of it is really important. We know he's as good as it gets on his line, but the link with Manchester City is really interesting, because, of course, it's been brought up a lot this week about the fact that Donnarumma is not great with his feet, and of course we've seen that at first hand in the UK. Of course, we go back to that game early in the Luis Enrique period, where they were absolutely pummeled at St James's Park, and then Newcastle getting after Donnarumma was a huge part of that, by the way, as well as the atmosphere at St James's Park that night. If I was Pep Guardiola, I wouldn't want him. If I was Galatasaray, who play with a very, very high defensive line, I wouldn't want him. In fact, it's very, very hard to say, admirable and excellent as he is, where does he fit?
Well, City would be, has all kinds of ramifications. If he ends up being, a £400,000 a week goalkeeper at Manchester City, what happens to James Trafford? And more importantly then, because Trafford seems to me to be the first genuine solution on the horizon to Jordan Pickford. Now, Jordan Pickford's been brilliant for England, but he can't go on forever and ever and ever. Even, goalkeepers have tremendous longevity. And also, even if he does go on forever and ever, he needs challenging. And James Trafford looks like the likeliest candidate for that. But if he's reduced to sitting on the bench watching Donnarumma for the next 5 years, there's another knock-on for English football as well as for Manchester City. What about Manchester United, whose goalkeeper gave... Look, we all know Arsenal's, particularly Declan Rice's corners, are devastatingly accurate. But it was a poor effort today and turned out to be the difference between the two teams. Would Manchester United be a place for him to land? They could afford him.
I think that's a good question. And I think he would suit United more than he suits City. But I think you look at the build of Donnarumma and think he's a guy who could handle himself in terms of aerials in the Premier League. But when does he come off his line and want the ball?
No, never.
I mean, really, I think that's a bit of a block to really, truly succeeding in the Premier League. Look, he's still relatively young. He's got enormous experience, and sometimes I think that can make us think that he's older than he is. I don't think we should say that he's not intelligent enough to evolve and learn, because I'm sure he is as well. Maybe he can change the way he keeps goal. But I dare say, if he does arrive in the Premier League, before we even get to the bit whether he's a success or not, I think, like a lot of defenders who arrive in the Premier League, there will be a very, very tough opening bit where, of course, because he's such a big name and because he'll be getting paid so much money, he will be under absolutely immense pressure. And for what it's worth, going back to Chevalier, I think he's going to challenge Mike Maignan in terms of being the goalkeeper for France going forward. I think Maignan will hold it for a while yet. But Chevalier, obviously, if he performs for PSG over a number of months, that'll put pressure on Maignan ahead of the World Cup.
And of course, you're right, say PSG want to go on it. They want to improve their team, not stand still and wait for others to catch up. They're playing tonight against Nantes, and it is interesting that they decided to play their strongest possible team against Spurs in the meaningless Super Cup. but feel they can get away with 8 changes against Nantes in Liga.
It is, but I guess where they are, Danny, I mean, you can say the Super Cup's meaningless. I don't think it is PSG.
I only say it's meaningless because Spurs didn't win it, obviously.
Of course. You can have it. You want it more than us. It means more to you.
Yeah.
But I
little
think,
French club, nice.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for them it was a huge deal because it's all about international profile. And when it comes to this, they're going to have to treat. I don't think they have any option other than to treat the opening weeks of Liga like a pre-season, really. And that's about getting minutes into all the players. So you look, they've completely changed the defence. Chevalier's one of only 3 who started in the week. Is him, Barcola and Vitinha. And Vitinha actually has scored the goal, having missed that penalty, and then being some discussion after he missed a few recently over whether he should be the penalty taker still going forward. He broke the deadlock after 67 minutes. He's currently Nantes 0, PSG 1. So they're edging towards a pretty unspectacular win there at the Beaujois.
Okay, listen, thanks very much for that. Next up, we'll continue to talk about France as we go into the opening salvos of the Ligue 1 season, and that means it's a return, ladies and gentlemen. I know how desperate you are for Star of the Week to be back here on Trans Europe Express, and indeed it is. You're listening to Andy Brassell, thankfully, and me, Danny Kelly, live in London. I say like I'm at London Palladium or something, and you're listening to Trans Europe Express. Yeah, it's just been hearing from Andy Brassell. PSG are playing tonight, so football is back in France. Our headline for everything that's going on in Ligue 1, he has come to the Rennes place. He has come to the wronger place, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Because, Andy, our favourite thing in France, mostly because you find what happens to Lyon financially so painful, our favourite thing then is the carrying on in and around Marseille Football Club. And they've been very much at it again the last few days.
Yeah, they have. Although, interestingly, certainly pre-match, all the focus was on Rennes. Now, there's been an interesting relationship between Rennes and Marseille this summer because Marseille sold two of their first teamers to Rennes to clear the decks, to improve their team. So the left-back, Quentin Merlin, went there, but so did the midfielder, rather combative guy called Valentin Rongier. And that's where the Ronge comes from, because from the moment, actually, before the moment he arrived, the Rennes fans made it clear that they really didn't want him to come, or the Ultras did, at least, because Rongier used to play for Nantes, so did Merlin, as it happened, who are the regional rivals of Rennes. But he'd given a jolly interview in his youth at Rongier when he was still a first-teamer at Nantes, saying, I would never sign for Rennes. I would never sign for them, and obviously making fun of them and all the rest of it. He tried to play it down.
I take it the fans have completely forgotten about all that, Andy.
Yeah. Once he said, I was only having a bit of a laugh, and people need to take it not so seriously. He genuinely said people need to take it not so seriously, which is almost guaranteed to infuriate people even more. So obviously, he made an immediate Rennes debut, starting against his old club that he'd just come from. And there were a couple of very hostile banners, including one in the cop behind the goal that said, to do a Rongier expression, throw your honour in the gutter, lose all credibility and respect for yourself. And that was the more polite one.
Yeah.
So obviously, Habib Bey, formerly of Newcastle, Aston Villa and Hull, amongst others, and Marseille, of course, continuing that connection. He not only included Rongier in the 11, he made him the captain. Now, they went down to 10 men in the first half, Rennes, but they were brilliant. And I tell you what, Rongier was absolutely brilliant as well. They've had a tough old week, but they ended up scoring a last-minute goal and winning the game, despite playing over half the game with 10 men. So a brilliant result for them. Rongier came out to face the cameras afterwards and say how he knew it was all going to be all right, and I'm long enough in the tooth to put up with it. Which, sure, I mean, he's not hidden from any of it, which I think is pretty impressive. But talking of hidden, there have been various leaks, various reports in France about the massive row that Marseille had in the dressing room after losing this opening game. Look, it's one game. You've got to get over it. But Jonathan Rowe, of course, who came across...
That's not the way Marseille work, Andy, and you know it perfectly well.
No, it's not. And young Jonathan Rowe didn't have his greatest game, having started the game. Igor Paschal, their big signing's not fit enough yet to start. He was told off by a lot of his senior teammates, which I think is a particularly brilliant look, including Adrien Rabiot and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. So they've just got to try and calm things down a level to get their season back on track, because obviously they're either flying or on the floor.
And when you do this for a living, as I do, and you do, you sometimes realise that an opinion you hold just doesn't chime with the general public. I'm of the opinion that Eric Dyer is a terrific bloke, and not just because he went into the crowd to sort out somebody who was abusing his family, but B, is a pretty good footballer. Now, I know this is in England, this is held to be heresy now because, he's not the modern kind of player. But seeing what he's doing in his first few days as a Monaco starter tells me that I'm not wrong.
Well, let's start, Danny, by saying Bayern Munich wanted to keep him.
Yeah,
that's
that
enough.
Much there's that. Yeah,
that much is really interesting, and I think at Bayern and now at Monaco already, he's valued not just by what he does on the pitch, and he made his debut against Le Havre, and with the Tottenham connection, if we can go into that a little bit, Hugo Lloris's brother Gauthier opened the scoring by scoring an own goal. He plays for Le Havre, and he opened the scoring for Monaco. Then Eric Dyer got a header from a corner for the second to score on his Liga debut, which was great for him. They won 3-1 in the end, but it was really about the fact that he's playing alongside in the back four Christian Mawassa, who they've got really high hopes for, only 20 years old. Mawassa and the coach Ali Hutter are saying, look, there's been a massive improvement in Mawassa's performance since he's had Dyer next to him, talking him all through it, or mumbling him all through it, because he's got a bit of a mumble to him, doesn't he, when he's speaking English. So already Dyer's an absolutely massive hit in the Principality. And there were big questions really over the transfers that Monaco were doing this summer, because of course Paul Pogba was the big one. Now they hope that he'll be training in 2 weeks. He'll be back in the
autumn,
team for like October, if they're lucky. He was there looking resplendent in a retro Monaco shirt.
That's the way to do it for the fans, isn't it, as well? Yeah.
Absolutely. He was wearing the 96-97 one. If you're thinking Ali Benabia, John Collins,
what a team,
Sonny Anderson, all of those. So he chose very, very nicely indeed, and got props for that. Ansu Fati, they're still waiting for him to come back after he's signed as well. But Dyer is just calming them down and assuring the interim.
Andy, I want you to talk about the next story pretty briefly, because I want to leave 3 or 4 minutes for Star of the Week for both of us, because when we were rehearsing, is that the right word? When we were preparing the show, we started to talk about the French squad that won the 2018 World Cup. And and one or two names, I go, he was in the squad. No, I follow football pretty closely. I think you could say I follow it with a jeweler's eyepiece, but it was amazing to hear some of these names. So just tell us about what's been going on. Lyon are playing tonight away at Lens. That's interesting because Lens are now coached by Pierre Sage, who did so well at Lyon before being unceremoniously given a boot in the pants off the premises by the now discredited John Textor. So a big game for Pierre.
Yeah, it was yesterday. So Lyon went to Lens for their first game of the season. Now, bear in mind, since Pierre Sage has left, Textor's also left. The guy who was handpicked to replace him, and the only reason Sage was binned is because all of a sudden Fonseca was available. The guy who replaced him, Fonseca, has been banned from the touchline for 9 months. He's still in the stand at the moment and won't be back until September at the earliest. And Lyon have got relegated, got reprieved from relegation, and cut their wage bill from 150 million to 55. In fact, that's probably nearer 50 since Nemanja Matic left in the week. So it's been a strange old time, and obviously he's trying to step out of his comfort zone and make it big at Lens, which is a great club with just incredible support. The travelling Lyon fans gave a brilliant reception to Pierre Sage, and they were applauded by the Lens fans for that. It ended up, though, with a 1-0 Lyon win. Fonseca's lot winning. Malik Fofana, who's getting a lot of Premier League interest, had a brilliant game, set up the winner for Mikhail Tadze, who got a message from Alex Lacazette before the game to say, look, now it's your turn to create history. You're my replacement. Go do it.
You're my slightly cheaper replacement. Go and do it.
Exactly. Knowing that, like Lacazette, he's a Lyon guy, and it means a lot to him.
So, Andy, who's your star of the week in France?
Mine's Kamori Doumbia, who I've always really loved, midfield player who is at Brest, was involved in the game today against Lille, which the biggest headline was Olivier Giroud making his comeback in Liga. He scored very early on with one of his first touches, 38 years old, and he's been brilliant already, much better than he was at LAFC, where it was a bit of a disaster. Looking good to be back in France, as you're going to come on to, like one of a number of 2018 stars. Florian Thauvin played for Lens this weekend as well. Yeah. But Kamori Doumbia was replacing someone important for Brest, because they lost their best midfielder, Mady Camara, this week, who went over to Rennes. So Doumbia stepped up, scored 2 from midfield. They were 3-1 down. They got a 3-3 draw, Brest, in the end.
Okay, well, my star of the week, because was Djibril Sidibé. Of course, Everton fans remember him. And he plays for Toulouse now, and he got a last-minute winner at Nice. All very standard performance for star of the week. It was his first goal in Liga for 5 years, since Oh, no,
Eight.
8 years, since 2017. My mathematics, God. But the important thing was, you said to me as I was saying, why don't I do Gibril Sidibé? And you said, oh, yeah, World Cup winner. And I went, what? And then you started going through the fringe players of the 2018 French World Cup squad, many of whom are very, very famous and very familiar to Premier League fans. You mentioned Florian Thauvin there, for instance. We always forget there's a hinterland of about 8 players who don't play during these big tournaments but get the World Cup winners' medal.
Yeah, you look at Fekir, Tolisso involved.
Tolisso got a World Cup winners' medal. Fekir got one. Yeah, incredible.
I think the interesting thing, Danny, is whenever there's any sort of piece of news or article written about these guys in the French newspaper or they're talked about on the sporting news, you always have to say, you call them initially Corentin Tolisso, and then they say, the 2018 world champion. Is an amazing epithet. It's like how you have to be called Mr. President forever. So I guess what England have got to do is win the World Cup next summer so we can see in future if our players are referred to like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the fringe players in England's last World Cup winning team, all those, over half a century ago. I'm thinking about Ron Springett, who was, I think, the third choice goalkeeper. No, Gordon West might have been the third choice goalkeeper. Did Ian Callaghan play one of the group matches at stalwart Liverpool winger? So this is not Bobby Charlton. This is not Bobby Moore. And it's also not a game for the teenagers listening to Trans Europe Express, where next we'll be turning our attention to what's been going on in Italy and a very busy transfer window for AS Roma. So, Andy, as you know, we're old friends and we've been working together for a decade. I've definitely no interest in throwing you under the bus, but I want to know if you've ever... I'm doing now world champions from England's 1966 World Cup squad. Have you ever heard of Jerry Byrne?
No, I've not.
No reason to hear about Jerry Byrne. he was the unsung hero of Liverpool's midfield when they were going from being a pedestrian mid-table sort of team to being Bill Shankly's league champions. Jerry Byrne was in the squad. Ron Flowers.
Yes.
Yeah, Ron Flowers played for Wolverhampton Wanderers at the time of the World Cup, but you can see what end of his career he was at when his next move a year later was to Northampton Town. Although people should remember, Northampton Town also did an amazing thing around this time, 60 years ago, when they went to the top division of English football and back down again in 9 seasons. And finally, I should make the point, I don't think he got an appearance. Terry Payne, a man called Terry Payne, was in that England squad in 1966. He made 713 league appearances for Southampton. Almost 900 games in total for Southampton. Terry Payne was also in the squad. Ian Callaghan, as I mentioned, already was, and I was wrong about the third choice goalkeeper. It was Peter Bonetti. Springett was the second choice. Let's get back to, these are the kind of tributaries that make this programme so worth listening to, aren't they, in my humble opinion? And let's get back to Italian football then. Our headline is Roma's conundrum, because they're wondering, I don't know why they would think about selling Manu Kone. He's such a good player, except, of course, that they may need to make some money out of him.
Yeah, one of their best players last season, Danny. He's a huge success after coming over from Borussia Mönchengladbach. They paid just under 20 million euros for him up front, about 18, with a few little add-ons to come. And given that they had 3 coaches and they were chaotic at various points until Ranieri properly got hold of them, he was the only player I can think of who's good for all 3 coaches. And he was brilliant last season for his first season after moving into Serie A from the Bundesliga. So proving yourself in Serie A is as big a thing in Italy as proving yourself in the Premier League is in England. And what that means is that Kone has got admirers, and he's got admirers with a little bit of money as well. So Inter were in talks for him earlier this week, prepared to offer over 40 million euros, which, we were talking about the maths earlier. I don't think we need telling that's more than twice what they paid a year ago. Now, if Roma could get 50 million, I wonder if they would consider doing business. Now, the Friedkins personally pulled the plug on the talks earlier this week because it was being suggested that maybe Roma need the money so they can complete the signings of Leon Bailey, who they're very close to, and Jadon Sancho, who there's a little bit more discussion over the wages. But of course, Manchester United are very keen to sell to Roma, and Roma are the most feasible to sell at the moment. Now, look, we've every reason to imagine that it could be a good time in Serie A for both of those players. We've seen a lot of players, not just English players, come out of the Premier League and really regenerate themselves.
Yeah, but losing Kone to get one of those two doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Andy, if I'm absolutely truthful with you.
No, I agree. And they were clear to show earlier in the week, the Friedkins, that they could hang on to Kone and do business for these two. Now, look, if I'm in their position, there's no way I'm selling Kone so I can buy Jadon Sancho. And I love Jadon Sancho, but let's be realistic about this. The fact is, if you hold Kone, and he goes on to do well in Europe, and he goes on to do well in the World Cup for France, notably, because he's a starter for France now since he's arrived at Roma. If they can bring Premier League clubs into play, it's all very well in being popular with Italian clubs for the moment.
No,
if they
in a year's time after the World Cup, it could be worth 3 times what they're talking about now, couldn't he?
Exactly, and certainly 3 times what they paid. So I think the smart play would be to hold on to him. But of course, they've got FFP issues. It's the same for a lot of clubs in Italy at the moment, some very big clubs who we're going to go on to talk about in a little second. So if we're looking at, it's been quite an exciting transfer window so far, certainly the most exciting in a while, because of course we've had a lot of English clubs holding back with FFP, not so much in this transfer window. I think if you're looking at a league where it's going to be really exciting in the last 2 weeks of the transfer window, look at Serie A, because these clubs are going to be not just buying, but like trading furiously, I think.
And because the door is open in Italy to win the title, isn't it? As we've said recently.
Yes.
5 different winners in the last 5 years, none of them Juventus. So the door is open. If you can get the right squad together, the right manager, even Antonio Conte, you can win the title in Italy. Andy, one of the teams you're talking about who they're having a bit of a shake-up is Milan. They definitely needed a shake-up because they were so poor last year that they're in the first round of the Coppa. They're playing the Coppa Italia tonight.
They are.
But they kind of played in this round for a little while now, can they? But they are.
I can't ever remember it. In fact, so they're 2-0 up against Bari at the moment. A goal scored by Rafael Leao and Christian Pulisic. We're into the last 20 minutes. Now, the interesting thing, not only that Leao's had a good start to the season with a goal, he went off injured in the first 20 minutes. So he opened the scoring, and then he starts holding his calf, and you think, okay. I mean, this is a thing that could not be just. He clearly wasn't going to run it off, so we might be looking at a couple of weeks already, which would be a real shame. So they brought on Santi Jimenez for him, but most of their new signings not starting. Estupinan's started on the left hand side. They brought Alexis Salamakers back from Roma. He was in that loan exchange with Tammy Abraham last season. He was great for Roma. He's been brilliant in pre-season for Milan as well. So everyone with a sort of clean slate under Max Allegri. They're going with 3 at the back, and it'd be really interesting to see how they get on, because for me, obviously they've got work to do between now and the end of the window.
Well, first and foremost,
a lot of making up to do to get to the top 4, I think.
We'll see how Modric gets on. He's not eternal. He's a legend, but he's not eternal. I think
he's just come on about 5 minutes ago, actually, for his Milan debut.
It's stupid now. Brighton are a trading club. I get that totally, but what a catch that was for Milan. Because I think he's a fantastic player.
Agreed.
And of course, the non-appearance of Rasmus Højlund today at Old Trafford suggests to you that maybe there's more than just talk about his ending up in Milan. And of course, the way Manchester United failed to feed their new centre forward in the last 25 minutes suggested maybe the problem wasn't always with Rasmus Højlund either.
Get a buy option. Get a buy option.
The other club, I say it's 6 long years now since Juventus, having, to use the word of the former Prime Minister, spaffed their dough on Cristiano Ronaldo. Juventus haven't won the title for half a decade now, which in the modern world is remarkable. They still got plenty to do as well. They haven't quite got Kolo Muani in on a permanent basis, and they're struggling, or at least they're trying very hard to divest themselves one or two of their bigger earners, Vlahovic obviously, and Douglas Luiz, who, given that he was a very good player in the Premier League, I'm surprised hasn't been enticed back to these shores.
Yes, I mean, I think he will be before the end of the window. But I guess what the whole world knows is how desperate Juventus are to get rid of him. Yeah. So they're going, can we have our money back, please? And they're not going to get their money back. No. They can't sit there moaning about in Italy and in the Italian papers at the moment. A lot has been put on, for them not to sustain a capital gains loss. So after amortization, not to sustain a loss. They've got to sell him for at least 40 million.
Good luck with that.
Continue asking for that, because you won't get it. He's on big wages. You've been desperate to get rid of him. They were shopping him around in January. They showed their hand too early, really, Juventus, and I think that's a bit of an issue. Really,
we've got about a minute, Andy. But let me throw this at you. Dusan Vlahovic has been a failure at Juventus. That is the truth of it. There's still a decent footballer in there. Somebody can make a good footballer out of him.
I agree, especially when you look at his age. I would say qualified failure, because he's had his moments. Obviously, he's way too expensive. They're paying him 12 million a year, which he's not going to get anywhere else outside Saudi. I would say there are a few Premier League clubs, maybe a certain one, who are having striker issues at the moment in the northeast of England, who I think it's worth having a little go for him. Only a year left on his contract. Juventus have to sell him now. They won't be charging a lot of money for him.
Yeah, I would also say that he's a classic Daniel Levy last minute of the transfer window backup for Solanke. But the way Richarlison has played the last 3 games, and I include the Europa League final in that, if he stays fit, then there's no need to bring another striker seriously, because he's such a menace. And as we saw yesterday, he can score good goals if given the chance. Listen, Andy, the first hour if you've been back from the holiday, everyone said to me behind your back that you'd be rusty and it wouldn't be any good. I stuck up for you. I really stuck up for you. And it turns out I was absolutely right. You've been brilliant. Listen, thank you for listening to us. We've got a lot more to get through in the next 2 hours of Trans Europe Express. And you're listening to it on the mighty, mighty talkSPORT.
Everyone knows there are 20 managers in the Premier League, yeah? Well, actually, no. Around 3/4 of them are not managers. The terms manager and head coach are often used interchangeably to describe Premier League bosses, but they're actually two different jobs. So let's explain how and why. For years, fans referred to Mikel Arteta as Arsenal's manager, but I'm afraid technically...
I don't think so, no.
From his first day on the job, he was the Gunners' head coach. Let's pick a random moment in time, February 2025. Only 6 Premier League bosses actually held the official title of manager rather than head coach. Man City's Pep Guardiola, David Moyes of Everton, Ipswich boss Kieran McKenna, Southampton's Ivan Juric, Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace and Leicester's Ruud van Nistelrooy were the only actual managers of their respective teams. Everyone else? That's right, head coach, including Ruben Amorim at Man United. He took over from Erik ten Hag, a man who had held the title of manager. Might come as a surprise that Amorim's appointment marked the first time ever that Man United had a head coach instead of a manager. But to understand why they made that decision, you also have to get what the difference is between a head coach and a manager. A manager's got a huge range of responsibilities. They're not just in charge of training and player lineups, they're also heavily involved in player sales and transfers. Critical stuff. But a head coach's role is far more focused on team training and performance on the pitch. So whereas Ten Hag was highly involved with decisions around transfers during his tenure, the intention was that Amorim wouldn't be, at least not on the same level. And as the sporting structure at Man United changed under Sir Jim Ratcliffe, people like Sir Dave Brailsford took charge of transfers instead. How all those roles play out in practice may be slightly different at different clubs though. On the other hand, the contracts of actual managers like Pep or Moyes had no limits on their job role and their involvement with transfers and contracts. But those guys are actually in the minority now, and it's a change that's happened pretty quickly. In 2019, there were only 6 head coaches in the Premier League, but by 2025 there were 14. A clear indication that more and more clubs are moving towards a model where the guy in charge is actually only really in charge on the pitch. And the way things are going, it might not be long before all 20 clubs have got
Yeah, those of you watching on Smart TV, YouTube and all the other ways you can see this now, as well as listen to its joyous tones, and will be laughing because I do a hand motion as though I'm playing those keyboard riffs by the mighty Kraftwerk, when of course anyone knows me knows that I cannot play a note of music. I love music, but I can't play it at all. You're listening to the second hour of 3 of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me is Andy Brassell. We've got lots to get through in this second hour, including Mbappe Watch. We'll be joined by Greg Whelan to talk about club focus on Como. We'll talk about Spain and Germany as well. Don't forget, we've got a poll for you tonight. Just go to X/Twitter, at talkSPORT, at Danny Kelly Words, and at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's. And where will Gianluigi Donnarumma be playing once the transfer window is shut? We talked about it earlier on. Will it be at Manchester City, Manchester United, Galatasaray, or the Saudi Pro League? Where will he go? Go and vote in the poll. We'd love to know your opinion. Go to Twitter, at talkSPORT, at Danny Kelly Words, and Andy Brassell. Express. Yes, this is Trans Europe Express. I've told you what we're going to do, but first of all, making a return, Andy wants to apologise to all of its myriad fans that we missed it out last week. It's time now for this.
Sa carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de qui Mbappé? Allez, Kylian!
Andy, the lack of Mbappe watch last week shows that you can't afford to be going on holiday. The whole show just goes to bits.
Yeah, speaking of going to bits, Atletico Madrid have just conceded an equaliser. Espanyol, which was a bit of a surprise as well. So, they were... I guess not in Simeone's good books anyway. He made 2 substitutions at half-time. Cardoso, who was making his debut, and Conor Gallagher were both dragged off. Koke to pull them out of the soup again. But despite having a few better chances in the second half, they've just conceded an equaliser. Edu Esposito's free kick and Rubio nipping him round the back to finish under Oblak. So about just under 25 minutes left to go there, and Atletico have got to go and try and win it all over again.
Yeah, let me talk then about Mbappe watch. And, of course, we have no Real Madrid match to report on because, as always, those big babies from Real Madrid, because of their involvement in, I don't know what, you probably speak better Spanish than me, but it must be sort of a grande bebe, mustn't it? The big babies, we need all the time we can to recover from the World Club Championship. So they don't play till Tuesday against Osasuna. Don't laugh, Andy, I'm serious.
No, but having said that, Danny, they probably looked at the fixtures and said, we're going to play Osasuna, we need a couple of extra days as well, because it always tends to be quite a physical battle. I think it's fair to say. And they're going to need everyone they can get, because at the moment, they've got a ton of injuries, particularly in midfield. Now, we were talking about Luka Modric earlier. I mean, I wonder if they sent him a little wish you were here type postcard, really, because, of course, no Jude Bellingham at the moment. He's had his shoulder surgery. Camavinga won't be fit for Tuesday either. Fede Valverde's a doubt. So they're missing a lot of players. We're into Dani Ceballos territory already. And, it's only the 17th of August. So they've got a few little issues there. Xabi Alonso apparently is not exactly over the moon that it seems that they're not going to do any more transfers this summer. Of course, what might change that if they were to have a sudden influx of money from somewhere else. So watch this space on the right wing.
We'll come on to those spaces on either wing, Andy. But I want to get a wider view of Real Madrid, if I may, because we've argued that Mbappe, for a settling in season, did very well.
He did.
And, they're still a team to be feared and all the rest of it. But the truth is they didn't win anything last year. So what, for Kylian Mbappe individually, but more importantly, I guess, for Real Madrid, what looks like success in 25-26?
Well, there's no individual answer to it, is there, Danny? Because however well he does, it's clear that if Real Madrid don't win stuff, it just doesn't count for the wider world. I think if you asked 10 people in the street who like football, probably 9 of them would say Kylian Mbappe's first season at Real Madrid had been a failure. And I think to a lot of those people, it would be a surprise how high the numbers were, because they didn't get the trophies over the line. It just feels as if it was a big letdown. Remember, finished second in the league, lost in the Copa del Rey final, fell well short against Arsenal in the Champions League. And these are the moments that count, especially the Champions League. So, look, unless they can really make up some room in the Champions League, and clearly they've organised the defence already, which is a big start, because that was a huge problem for them. But unless they
weren't helped with injuries there, to be absolutely frank. I know they ran out of players. You could say they should have backup players, but a bit like Tottenham, they just ran out of defenders in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. But there was a feeling before the start of the season that they might have reinforced in that area. And of course, football likes to prove you emphatically wrong as quickly as possible, and that's what happened. Interesting development in training in the last couple of days is David Alaba, who, with them having pursued him for so long, has now become post-injury a bit of an albatross, really, in terms of his contract. They've been trying him out as a defensive midfielder in recent days. Now, I think that's quite an interesting idea, because they do need someone to sit in front of that defence. They can sort out the defence all they like, and this defence is going to have to get used to playing together. Of course, they're going to play with a 3 rather than a 4 this season is the most likely solution. Again, that means they probably lack a little bit of cover. But the idea that Alaba, who, when they played him at left-back, has looked not up to it at all anymore, partially because of the injury, partially because he's really a centre-half these days. But, of course, he's played everywhere for Austria. So the idea that he plays as a sitter, I think is probably quite an interesting one. And to see how that develops over the first couple of weeks will be interesting. But of course, Kylian Mbappe is wearing the number 10 this season. That's an at least optical departure. It means Endrick's wearing the number 9. So we'll see if that actually means a rise in importance in the hierarchy.
These shirt numbers don't mean a great deal to me. I think there's a lot of fuss about nothing, but the adoption of the number 10 shirt by Mbappe, because for a decade now, if ever you're in trouble, Real Madrid just called on the number 10, didn't they? Which was Modric, and now the answer to all their problems will be Mbappe, because that's how it's worked out.
I think the interesting thing really is, though, Danny, if we go back a year further, when we talk about what Real Madrid didn't do after winning the Champions League against Borussia Dortmund at Wembley, the obvious thing is Toni Kroos, because he was the player. You can talk about any other injury you want. Kroos and Modric for a decade have covered a multitude of sins, really. Modric, we know how he's done it. Kroos, they could find no other player like him. That's why Ceballos has become serviceable again. Not because I don't think there are a lot of people who think, oh yeah, he's the standard of a great Real Madrid team, because I don't think he is. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's quite of that level. But he was the closest in the current squad to being able to replicate what Modric can do. And so they've got to go out there and find that unicorn at some point.
Why haven't they gone for Stiller as a defensive midfielder?
Well, I watched him at first hand last night, actually, against high quality opposition for Stuttgart, against Bayern Munich. We'll talk about my visit to
definitely
the Franz Beckenbauer Super Cup later. My feeling is Stiller could be a Real Madrid player at some point. My feeling is also that maybe he needs to work on being a little bit more two-footed, because that was one of the things that made Kroos so great in tight spaces, whereas Stiller still wants to get it onto his left all the time.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. I'm not making a comparison with Toni Kroos. My point was, if Alaba is required to shield a 3, then it looks to me that of the available players around the place, Stiller would be the one, but But they won't buy him without selling. No, quite.
I think he'd be great for them medium term.
Yeah. What about then? We talked earlier on about Donnarumma and difficulty, and of course it is hugely difficult to buy, hello Tottenham, or sell these hugely expensive and massively paid footballers. But there's been so much talk about Rodrigo, and we saw with Xabi Alonso's system, you haven't got room for 3 forwards all the time. One of them has to become an auxiliary midfielder, and that's what Fede Valverde will be, I think, the number 1 option for. And yet the name of Rodrigo keeps echoing around the boardrooms of Premier League clubs, not least Manchester City.
Yeah, and look, I understand that. He's one of the best footballers in the world. I mean, I think it's a really fascinating thing that you have 2 of, I think, the top 10 players in the world in Rodrigo and Vinicius Junior, and you probably got to let one of them go just for the sake of balance, financial as well as tactical.
It's kind of the modern game, isn't it?
As well as hierarchical. Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I think simultaneously you can make the argument that Vinny Junior is the best player in the world, and the argument that Real Madrid should sell him. I think I'm probably 60% sold on one of those, and maybe 75%.
Do you know which one though? That's the problem.
Yeah. I'm closer to selling him than crowning him. I think.
Right.
Look, he's brilliant. I love him in every way. But I think as soon as they signed Mbappe, not really for tactical reasons, but because of hierarchical reasons, I think they needed to get rid of him. And of course, re-upping his contract is super complicated when Mbappe's come in and you've got to match Mbappe's wages. He actually wants to get paid more than Mbappe, which is definitely not going to happen, because that would be an absolute political time bomb, and one with a very short fuse. But I think the other thing is, really, it's about the effect they've had on each other, which I think is a largely negative effect. Not because I don't think they fit in the same team together. They're more than intelligent and versatile enough to fit together, and you can even have them in the front too. But if we go back to the beginning of last season, I don't know if you remember that game where Mason Greenwood played for Marseille against PSG. He was terrible, got taken off at half time.
No, go on.
De Zerbi spent the next week showing him videos of Vinicius Junior and saying, look, star players can do stuff off the ball. Look at this guy.
Yeah,
and
watch him.
Mason Greenwood has obviously taken none of this advice on board, but still, I think it's really interesting because no one now is using Vinny Junior as a template for what a forward does off the ball, because he doesn't do any of it. He does less off the ball than he did before. And, I think him and Mbappe aren't improving each other. I think that's a real issue. By the way, talking of things not improving and going from bad to worse, Espanyol 2, Atletico 1. Real shock in the offing there in Barcelona. Luis Milla, who came on as substitute, both of the substitutes have scored for Espanyol. Ball came in from the right, and the header from Milla just looping over Oblak into the far corner. 6 minutes left of normal time there. Espanyol 2, Atletico 1. I don't know if you can say an opening day defeat is a real blow to their title challenge,
but Andy,
but it kind of is.
The timing is just perfect, because I was about to say, next up we'll move on to the rest of the football in Spain, where I will be predicting a title win for Atletico Madrid. 2-1 down at Espanyol. listening to talkSPORT and, of course, to Trans Europe Express, your Sunday night fix of football from across the continent and beyond. Don't worry, at 11 o'clock, Tim Vickery will be joining us from South America. I continue to comment on what the new studio and the use of earbuds is doing to my career. These days, I'm a vintage enough gentleman that my ears are larger than they used to be. I don't mind it because they start to remind me of my father's ears, which is a great thing. But I hide them under the headphones. Now they look like they're flopping over. If you're watching on TV, like they're flopping over at the ends from their own weight. I suspect that's to do with the way the earbuds work. Andy, let's move on then to Spain. Spain out with, as they say in Scotland, out with Real Madrid. Our headline is Mallorca have a mayor. The Islanders were playing at home to Barcelona in the opening fixtures of this year's La Liga. And they, in a controversial game, it's got to be said that not all of Barcelona's goals were entirely legit. They got a good whack-in and ended up with 9 men.
Yeah, they did. And really, it was all based around the second goal, Danny. So we had an early goal from Rafinha, carrying on from where he left off last season, after a brilliant ball by Lamine Yamal, ditto. But the second goal really was what changed everything, because at this point, by the way, it's still 11 aside. And Antonio Raillo, who's the captain of Mallorca, he gets hit in the head by a shot from Yamal, which looks like it's going in. And he's hit it hard enough, it knocks Raillo over. And everyone stops, except for Ferran Torres, who smashes it in the back of the net. And then you realise that actually the referee's allowing the goal. And hang about Arrasate, the Mallorca coach, is going absolutely mad. Now, it's explained to him, he says afterwards, Arrasate, in that Raillo didn't look dazed. Which is an opinion.
Well, hang on, what doctor made that decision, Andy?
I mean, it's extraordinary that the referee thinks he can make that decision in the space of the 5 seconds between Raillo getting hit in the head and Ferran putting it in the back of the net. I mean, to me, it seems like a total contravention of the rules. Mallorca completely lose it afterwards. They get 2 players sent off in just under 10 minutes, including show favourite Vedat Muriqi, who makes his mark on new Barcelona goalkeeper Joan Garcia by, let's get this straight, studding him in the head. I mean, it's not one of the most controversial VAR sending offs of this season. But what this all means anyway is, apart from poor old Garcia having a little bruise on his face, is the fact that Barcelona 2-0 up with a 2-man advantage at half-time in what could be potentially quite a difficult away game. There was a brilliant cutaway shot from one of the directors after the Muriqi red card, and it showed, and you know, we love crying fans. You know, it's part of the televisual experience, isn't it? So we have this footage of a young Mallorca fan. I reckon he's about 8 or 9, and he's wearing his brand new Mallorca shirt and his like devil's horns hat as well, to get fully into the experience. And he's crying his eyes out, the poor kid. It's really sad. Obviously, it's quite Moorish and compelling at the same time. So the camera stays on him for a while. And after about 10 seconds, this kid, who's only about 8 or 9, starts swearing his head off. And the director can't get him off him quick enough. But by then it's too late, obviously. Anyway, Lamine Yamal scores right at the end, a brilliant goal. Barcelona win 3-0, and despite it looking like they would only have half a team, even the night before the game, they get it over the line.
Well, this is going to be my next point. Nico Williams didn't go from Athletic to Barcelona because he was worried about the chaos at the club surrounding the way they register their players, finances, and all the rest of it. Marcus Rashford made his debut for Barcelona, so that's good. It means he's been registered. But it must be a sign that Nico was onto something when he's registered at 9:30 on the morning of the football match.
10:30 local time, Danny.
Oh, sorry, 10:30. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
9:30 UK time.
Yeah, 10:30 their time. Yeah.
So it's leaked to the press the night before that it's all okay and Joan Garcia can play, because initially it doesn't look like Joan Garcia or Wojciech Szczesny can play. So they're left with Iñaki Peña, the third choice
Pretty
goalkeeper.
good third choice.
Very good, but
fourth
not
choice
played...
if you include, of course, the club captain and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so third choice then. So, Peña hasn't played a minute pre-season. He hasn't played a single minute. And Cesc Fabregas is hoping to sign him for Como.
We'll talk about that a little later when Glenn Whelan joins us, yeah.
Yeah, we'll come on to that later. But yeah, that they were able to get Garcia, who was the main one, registered. And then the players appear on the website as they're officially registered. And Marcus Rashford showed up just after 10:30 a.m. on the morning of the game.
Meanwhile, Espanyol are playing Atletico Madrid. And this was the moment where I was about to say I think Atletico have done amazing things in the transfer window. I don't think Real Madrid are the power they've been in recent years. I mean, I know they're not. And Barcelona, last year, they won the title, but everything fell their way as the course of the season unfolded. So I wanted to say I think Diego Simeone might get his team across the line this time round. I have to pretend now that an early doors beating by Espanyol is not the end of the world.
No, I mean it's easy to think it is, just because there's such a high points tally
required
for it to happen.
Spain,
so every point lost is a big one. I'm not sure we are talking monster points totals of the past, because there's so many unknowables with Barcelona, especially as they're expected to do well in the Champions League this season. Although of course they've had the advantage of not playing the Club World Cup. Real Madrid are in this funny sort of mid-state of mid-rebuild, as you said. And you said Atletico have had an amazing summer. Well, they've spent an amazing amount of money, over 200 million euros, second big transfer window in a row. As we said, 5 debutants tonight. And this away performance where they've taken their eye off the ball is straight out of recent vintages, though. You know, there's been too many of these in recent years that have stopped them competing from the title in a meaningful way year after year after year. So that game has just finished now, by the way, 2-1 to Espanyol. They're celebrating on the touchline.
That's a fantastic win for Espanyol.
Yeah, of course. They lost Joan Garcia, their best player, to Barcelona, their city rivals this summer. Marko Dimitrovic, who's as old as us, is keeping goal for them now. A huge win for them. Huge blow for Atletico, taking the lead in the first half through Julian Alvarez. If you're looking for a crumb of comfort as an Atletico fan, I'd like to draw your attention back to Pep Guardiola and his first season in charge of Barcelona, 2008-2009. Record-breaking season for them. They lost the first game, 1-0 at Numancia. Okay, so there you go. No one remembers that.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And meanwhile, Athletic Bilbao, with Nico Williams still very much on board. They were playing Seville today, and it was a nice topsy-turvy game. Yeah,
it was a brilliant game, because I don't know about you, Danny, but I looked at that game and I thought it looks fantastic on paper. It's going to end up being a walkover, because I think we've discussed at length our fears for Sevilla this season, fears that will perhaps increase when their new coach Matías Almeida said in the week that he thinks Roberto De Zerbi is the best coach in the world. Now, look, I like De Zerbi. I'm really on the De Zerbi train. I don't think even Roberto De Zerbi and his family think he's the best coach in the world. No. So it's an interesting thing to come out with. But in terms of that meaning his team are going to be aggressive and positive and all that sort of stuff, it proved to be the case, because Athletic went 2-0 up. Nico Williams' pen, of course, he stayed there this summer. Sanadi getting the second as well. They were well on top of it. Sevilla came back, and they came back fiercely. They got it back to 2-2, and only a late winner from Robert Navarro. Lovely little finish. A cross was coming behind him, and he sort of tumbled and pulled it over his shoulder into the top corner. Got them the win in San Mamés Athletic in what will be a very exciting and very difficult season, because of course we know that they're quite restricted in terms of what they can do in terms of going out and getting players. There's only a limited amount of players they can get because of the Basque-only policy, which they have significantly bent over the years. But nevertheless, there's not a bottomless pit of money, and there's not a bottomless pool of players, and they're going to be in the Champions League for the first time in ages. So it could be tough for them at times this season. That was meant to be a nice little loosener against Sevilla, but positive for Sevilla as well.
Yeah, so who's your star of the week in Spain, Andy?
My star of the week, I think, if I'm not incorrect, is going to be from the same game as your star of the week. I've gone for Valencia's Dani Rabah, who I loved last season for Leganés. He was brilliant. I wondered if he'd get a move to a big club. Well, he did kind of get a move to a big club, even if they're only a rebuilding team. Of course, Ron Gourlay, the former executive at Chelsea, West Brom, etc. Yeah. He's in charge now of Valencia, and he's talked about it being an incremental effort to bring them back to some sort of prominence. But Rabah he was just great to watch last season. I'm looking forward to him playing for a bigger club. Played really well, I thought, in the game against Real Sociedad. Set up the opener for Diego Lopez with a brilliant left foot pass. Nearly scored a winner later on, even though it finished a 1-1 draw, which I believe you're going to pick up on.
Yes, of course. And my star of the week is another player who I think could be seeing days at bigger clubs very, very soon. Japanese winger Take Kubo of Real Sociedad, who, as you say, that game ended a draw. Real Sociedad, don't forget, already lost Zubimendi this season, so they won't want to lose Take Kubo, but he got an absolute banger from outside the box to ensure that draw with Valencia. And Andy, I rarely can tell you anything, but I know, because I know, that if Spurs don't get Savinho off Manchester City, he's their next port of call. And they won't be the only Premier League club watching this fella, because he appears to have the dynamite. He appears to have the TNT that you need. Thank you very much. That's all the latest from Spain. Next, I'll turn our attention, to use that phrase I overuse, and I really must learn not to football in Germany, where, prepare yourself, it's 31 minutes past 10 on the 17th of August. Bayern Munich have not got their way in the transfer window. Yeah, that music caused me to do a little bit of chair dancing, and as I always comment, now that I can see myself as well as hear myself, such as the modern media, I do look suspiciously like Donald Trump when dancing. So I really need to avoid that, Andy. My chair dancing looks like he's standing up dancing, you know what I mean? Let's turn our attention to... No, let's talk about Germany next, where the headline, Bayern won't be nicking him, because Bayern Munich normally, Andy, I suppose 85, 95% of the time in Germany get their way when they want other German clubs to give them the best players. But Nick Woltemade, who's been the subject of their voracious attention throughout the summer, will not be leaving, apparently.
Yeah, which is a big shock. This is
probably a shock to him as well.
Yeah, big time, because this was the major subtext of the Stuttgart Bayern Super Cup,
which of course you were at.
Yeah, named the Franz Beckenbauer Super Cup, equivalent of the Community Shield that was yesterday. Woltemade played very well, I thought, and played a role that he would probably never have to play for Bayern, like holding the ball up, which people don't think he's that good at. It turns out he's excellent at it.
Andrew, that's an interesting point you're bringing up, because the theory was that this Peter Crouch-like figure is going to play off of Harry Kane as a 10 or something. Where did he play for Stuttgart? Up front?
Yeah, he did. And because he's got so much to his game, there is that sense that, you know, he could fill in, even though he's a very different player, but for Musiala in the short term. Now, Michael Elise kind of did that yesterday. But Woltemade was proving that he's... Claudio Pizarro told me a day or two ago that he's got to learn to use his body better. And he's known Woltemade since he was like 17. They played at Werder Bremen together when Pizarro was at the back end of his career, and Woltemade was coming through the U team there. And it looks like he's gone away and done that this summer. Whether he's done that through a weightlifting program or backpacking around South America, I think he's probably done the latter. He looks that kind of guy, but it's really worked for him. And I do wonder, actually, because Harry Kane's so effective when he dropped deep, if the two of them play together, maybe it makes sense for Woltemade to play as the 9. But look, we won't be finding out this year, because... No. Stuttgart, having signed him for €0, because he couldn't get the Werder Bremen team last summer. He's had a brilliant campaign. They won the cup. He did well in the Champions League. He's got into the German national team, looked very, very good in the under-21 Euros this summer. Was one of the best players there, if not the best player there. And Bayern made it clear they were interested. He turned down every other club who, you know, raised half an eyebrow at him. And Bayern have never been prepared to pay what Stuttgart wanted, which was €70 million. That's right, €70 million. Wow. I realised he was good last season. Personally, I would have snapped their hand off at 50, which Bayern were prepared to offer. They had further talks, and clearly they were still miles apart. So Alexander Werl, the CEO of Stuttgart, said before the game and after the game that, look, this isn't going to be happening. He's 100% staying here. And Woltemade himself might have taken a side exit route, so he didn't have to speak to us after the game and say something.
Somebody did speak to you, but I'll come on to that in just a second, because I only mentioned Peter Crouch there because he is, of course, a similar kind of build to Woltemade. I was coming over this afternoon from the Republic of Ireland. The flight I was on was absolutely filled with English people who'd been to see Oasis the previous night in Dublin, because tickets were so hard to get for the UK dates that it was completely swamped by English folk having a weekend out in Dublin and going to see Oasis. Indeed, when the national TV station RTE did the live interviews around the stadium in the build-up to the gig, I could hear the verve of Richard Ashcroft banging away in the background, so I knew the exact timings. They couldn't find anybody with an Irish accent. They would just keep bumping into people with more and more English accents. But among those on the plane, Peter Crouch and the lady wife and one of his daughters, with his bucket hat on with Oasis written on the front of it. He was on his way back home. Once again, I was not the only Spurs legend on the flight, shall we say that? Listen, Kane got the opener. Luis Diaz got the winner for Bayern Munich in a 2-1 win. And afterwards, you spoke to Harry Kane. You caught up with him yesterday after that victory for Bayern in the German equivalent of the Community Shield.
Go back 2 years, you made your debut in a Super Cup fixture. It was a bit of a weird one. You know, you arrived in Munich the day before. It was incredibly hot. The team was 3-0 down about a minute after you came on. Did it feel like putting right or wrong from back then?
Yeah, I think that was a crazy kind of 24 hours to move and to play my first game with, the transfer went through early hours of that morning. So, that was a bit of a whirlwind. It was hard to kind of take that all in, and obviously disappointing that we lost as well. So, this was a chance for me to, start the game and, try and win another trophy. And, it's not the biggest trophy we're going to play for this season, but it's important to have that momentum to start the year. And, we celebrate every trophy like it's the first, and we move on to the next one.
Yeah, Harry Kane there, of course, famously the non-winner of the Europa League last season. Andy, the Bundesliga hasn't started, doesn't start till next week, but the Pokal, the FA Cup, is in full swing. Tell us about some of first of all, the big story last year was Bielefeld, who were in the third tier, cut a swathe through the Bundesliga top-tier teams, got to the final, then got a whacking. They're at it again.
So they knocked out 4 teams on their way to the final, where they lost to Stuttgart. They were getting flamed for a bit in the final. They were 4-0 down. They only lost 4-2 in the end. They made it quite tight in the end and gave Stuttgart a few little flutters. But one of the teams they knocked out was Werder Bremen. Now, Bielefeld have been promoted back to the second tier since then. They only beat them all over again. They beat Werder Bremen all over again. So dreadful start to the season for Werder Bremen and their new coaching staff. Lost a couple of big players, of course, including Marvin Duksch, who went to Birmingham City, as we know. So the late goal scored in that, absolute choker for them, and Bielefeld are at it again. Unbelievable. But look, there was some other shocks as well, some 4th and 5th tier sides going through. But the real ones to watch that I guess will be of interest to people, Bayer Leverkusen playing 4th division opposition, Sonnenhof Grassepack. They were really, really quite unimpressive, I thought, even though Patrick Schick opened the scoring early on. Grassepack were, shall we say, quite engaged. They ended up with 9 men. It could have been less. When lower division teams are really keen to impress and have sharpened their studs beforehand. Yeah. It was one of those. No serious injuries, which was good for Erik ten Hag because he's had quite a strange summer of players coming and going. And it looks like Elias Benseguir of Monaco might be going there to replace Amin Adli, of course, has got a deal to go to Bournemouth, which we expect to happen at some point this week. But yeah, a good win for them, but they weren't massively impressive. Who was really impressive was Xavi Simons, who, despite all the speculation linking him with a move to the Premier League, with either Chelsea or Manchester City, he's still playing for Leipzig. He started the game at Sandhausen in the 3rd tier yesterday. They won 4-2 after a really tightly fought first half. He played the full 90 minutes. He was brilliant. Scored the goal that clinched it right near the end, slaloming past a couple of players and scoring from a really difficult angle. I'm sure he'll end up in the Premier League before the end. But what's really important, I think, Danny, so many of these players who are waiting for a transfer, we see them get horribly out of shape while they're training on their own. Manchester United, I'm not saying he's terribly out of shape, but Šeško's not done a lot of team training, so no. Man United felt they couldn't start him today, for example. Whoever Xavi Simons signs for, he'll be ready to go minute one. You saw it yesterday, so I think that's really exciting for whoever gets him.
Yeah, the interesting thing in my mind there, Andy, as you were talking about Sandhausen, what was the other team? The team that Leverkusen played against?
Leverkusen played against Sossenbach.
Yeah, so teams that I've never heard of. In the last hour of Trans Europe Express, about half an hour's time, everybody's heard about Vitesse at Arnhem. They've been absolute regulars, but not in the Champions League, but in the Europa League, Conference League, and everybody has played Vitesse Arnhem at some stage. Famous old Dutch club. Spurs played them, was it 21? They played them in the Europa League, in the group stages. Yeah. So very recently, we have to tell you that Vitesse Arnhem are no more. They've lost their professional licence, and in the last few days, their players have been allowed to walk away from the club. It really is a horrible story, and it really has got, I think, implications for anyone who loves their football club because, again, usual story, wrong owners, set off a series of events that nothing, not the passion of the fans, not refinancing, not begging and pleading to the authorities can do anything about. And at about 11:15, we'll be getting all the latest from Alex Zonneveld, of course, a great friend of Trans Europe Express, of what exactly has happened to a famous old club like Vitesse Arnhem. And the reason I'm doing it is because A, they're Vitesse Arnhem, and B, your club could be next. They've got to sort out the ownership of these football clubs. The finances all look great when they're being juggled around the world and John Textor is flying into meetings here, there and everywhere. But these are community clubs. For 100 years, they've been supported by their local community, and they can't just be bought and sold like commodities, fish and chips, and then the wrapper thrown away when somebody's fed up with them and the club goes to the wall. Vitesse Arnhem will be in the next hour of Trans Europe Express, which you'll listen to now here on the Mighty Talk Sport. Yeah, you heard the advert there for Hawksby and Jacobs. It is, of course, a radio legend, one of the great radio programmes in this country. Well, this week I'm sitting in every day for Paul Hawksby, sometimes with Andy Jacobs, sometimes with Charlie Baker. Yes, the return of Baker and Kelly, if you like. It's a great show. I'll do my level best not to ruin it. Paul, I'm not so sure, is absolutely certain that that's what won't happen, judging by one or two of the texts in the last few days. Listen, we're going to have a club focus for you now. One of the most fashionable clubs, certainly one of the most beautifully positioned clubs, and a very successful club over the last few years has been Como. Big money involved, famous players coming and going, and they're heading into their second season in the top level of Italian football, since their recent promotion, of course. To talk about what's going on there and a bit beyond in Italian football, we're joined by our Italian football czar, Greg Whelan. Hello, Greg.
Good evening, Danny. Good evening, Andy.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Greg. Como, they've had a pretty interesting summer for a start. I mean, the really big news is that Cesc Fabregas is still there as manager and coach.
Yes, very true. Don't forget there was a lot of interest in him at the back end of last season,
Totally.
And in the start of the closed season. A number of clubs, there was an interest in a number of clubs, Leipzig and Leverkusen in Germany, certainly, but perhaps the one that we thought might tip it was Inter Milan. When Inzaghi left Inter Milan in the fallout from the Champions League final, there were conversations, and those of us who were watching the situation at the time thought this is a proper 50-50 situation. In the end, the club came out and said he's going nowhere. We've spoken to him. He's up for the project. On we go. And that was the end of that. So that was the start of, yes, what could be a very successful summer.
Greg, I wanted to ask, actually, do you think he's done the right thing in staying? I mean, from my perspective, it's a yes, because he's only had one season as a top flight coach. Obviously, he's implicated financially in Como as well. He's got a small stake in the club too. And also, I think if you're talking about going to another Italian club, there can't be many that are better resourced, can there? I mean, they've been keen to follow a certain line. Like, for example, you can understand why Leipzig were interested, because Como are about buying young players and developing them into the superstars of tomorrow. You look at Diao, you look at what they've done with Nico Paz, other ones that they've got in as well. Maxence Kakare to a lesser extent, obviously is a little bit older. For me, it feels like he shouldn't be in a rush. What do you think?
I agree with you entirely. Let's remember that Cesc Fabregas has only been a manager for less than 2 seasons. He was a manager in all but name when Como won promotion out of Serie B back in 23-24. Last season was his first season officially as a manager. He also, I mean, we've already used the word tonight, project. He has mentioned time and time again how much he believes in the project. Well, this is a project. This actually is a project with a goal or goals at the end of it. So I think if you put all of that together, you start to see, certainly I'm on your side in this. I really think, he wants to see a project through. He needs to give himself the time, realistically, to do just that. And they've still got a long way to go here in what they want to achieve.
Greg, there's been a whole load of players coming in or being linked with going out. I want to talk about one of them. First of all, Nico Paz, we just mentioned there. Brilliant young player. I know from my own connections with people, not myself, but people who know about Spurs, that Spurs did inquire about Nico Paz. I think the size of the flea they got in their ear was pretty big, wasn't it?
There's 2 things about Como this summer. They have recruited heavily, and they have worked very hard to tell everyone to go away about their own prize assets. You're absolutely right. 2 of the reasons why Como did as well as they did last season, and let's not forget they finished 10th in their first season back at the top level, were these 2 young men, Nico Paz and Assane Diao, who came in the January window. They were young players, they were exciting players, but they were players that also made a difference even at their tender age. And Como are all about building a team around players like that. So why would they listen to offers? It's not as if they need the money.
No, that of course is the stumbling block. They don't need cash, so you can't really just impress them with the massive wad that you're carrying in your back pocket. Among the players they brought in, Alvaro Morata, who made his debut in the Coppa Italia today. They're also after 2 huge names here. Barcelona's goalkeeper, Iñaki Peña. We're talking about the goalkeeping chaos at Barcelona. Peña doesn't look like he's going to get a minute of football at Barcelona, but he's a really good goalkeeper. That would be one. And the other one we keep hearing about is whether Aymeric Laporte, so brilliant for Manchester City for so long, now fed up with Cristiano Ronaldo at Al Nassr. But they're looking for both these players, are they?
That's right. The recruitment continues. They have brought in the best part of a dozen players, and they have spent some serious money. Only Juventus have spent more in this summer transfer window in Serie A. But there is no secret that the work is not done. There's still a couple of weeks to go, of course. The goalkeeper, as you already mentioned this evening, they're looking for competition for Jean Boutet, their French #1 goalkeeper at the moment. And yes, central defence is the other area. And although Aymeric Laporte doesn't fit the find these top young gems, these top talents around Europe. His experience could be vital. Let's not forget, it wasn't all that long ago they sought to draft in Rafa Varane, ex-Manchester United centre-back. Unfortunately, an injury forced him to retire shortly after it. But they do look for that experienced head, and I suppose you'd have to say Morata is going to be another one of those.
I guess that's the interesting thing, isn't it, really, Greg? The fact that we're talking about the Leipzig model, which it appears loosely based on in terms of squad composition, what they're trying to do. The thing that Leipzig never got their heads around is spending decent wages on experienced players of substance. Whereas I guess like best practice, if you go back a number of years, is if before we went full Moneyball in football, was the idea that to develop young players, you need the right experienced players as well. And if they go and get Laporte, and obviously there's Morata, who made his debut in the Copa against Südtirol yesterday, that I think shows a different sort of ambition. So I wanted to ask you firstly about that in terms of them wanting to develop quickly. Clearly, signing those more expensive, certainly in terms of wages, senior players is part of that. Also, tell us about the event that they had at their stadium this summer where they had Ajax, Celtic, a couple of other clubs come across. They want to go international pretty quickly as well, don't they?
Yes, they do. To take your first point first, just imagine these young lads, these top young lads coming from all over Europe. They come from Croatia, Spain, Belgium, Holland, wherever. Imagine them coming into this environment and having players of this pedigree to work alongside and learn from. That surely has got to be a key thing for any team that wants to grow. And this team definitely wants to grow. To come to your second point, yes, it was the inaugural Como Cup just a couple of weeks back, which was a great idea. And what stuck out for me was the quality of the opposition that they were bringing to Como, not just for the scenery, of course, but, Como, this is a team that were in Serie D, semi-professional, only 6 years or so ago, are bringing the likes of Ajax to the shores of Lake Como for a pre-season friendly. They also played Betis, and let's not forget last week, no one other than Barcelona in the Gamper Trophy. This is a sign of where Como want to be and where they feel they're going. And this is also a sign of where other clubs are beginning to see them.
And finally, Greg, it's been fantastic talking to you about Como again. We know that they, and being a Spurs fan, I was really grateful that they'd given a chance to Dele Alli. And of course, he had that disastrous debut where he got sent off after a few minutes coming on as a sub. What's the latest with Dele Alli? I don't think he's contracted to Como at the moment. They're still connected. Is that fair?
No, he is under contract. He's under contract until the end of this coming season. It was an 18-month deal that he signed back in the January window. So what is happening? You may have seen reports that he's out of favour, if you like, or he's not in Cesc Fabregas' plans. That is true. Sure. But what Como have made clear as well is they are looking for a loan deal for him elsewhere, possibly in the MLS, somewhere like America. Why? Because let's be clear on this, as Fabregas has been clear, this was not his signing. This was the club's signing. The club saw a reason to bring Dele Alli on board in the hope that Como could help him, rediscover his form, get his career back on track.
Yes.
Fabregas has said this wasn't me that did this. And so Como are taking on themselves saying, okay, well, if it's not working for you, and it's not working for you now, and we're trying to move on as a squad here anyway, let's see what we can do.
That's fantastic because, he's only 28 years of age. And after all that he's been through, and of course, what we now understand he'd been through prior to becoming a professional footballer, it would still be wonderful to see him play a succession of games, not at the level that he was playing, with Eriksson, Son and Kane 6 or 7 years ago, but even just to watch him enjoying his football again would be, for me, a thrill. And so I hope, Como have done a great work there, just bringing him back into the public eye, if nothing else. And if you could find an MLS club where the standard allowed him to express himself and, as I say, enjoy the game again, that would be a joy for everybody. And I'm sure most football fans would feel the same way as well, because to watch his decline has been painful. Greg, thank you very, very much indeed, as always. Greg Whelan there on Como. We need to go very quickly to the news and sport headlines for you, but don't worry, we've still got an hour to go here on Trans Europe Express.
knows there are 20 managers in the Premier League, yeah? Well, actually, no. Around 3/4 of them are not managers. The terms manager and head coach are often used interchangeably to describe Premier League bosses, but they're actually two different jobs. So let's explain how and why. For years, fans referred to Mikel Arteta as Arsenal's manager, but I'm afraid technically...
I don't think so, no.
From his first day on the job, he was the Gunners' head coach. Let's pick a random moment in time, February 2025. Only 6 Premier League bosses actually held the official title of manager rather than head coach. Man City's Pep Guardiola, David Moyes of Everton, Ipswich boss Kieran McKenna, Southampton's Ivan Juric, Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace and Leicester's Ruud van Nistelrooy were the only actual managers of their respective teams. Everyone else? That's right, head coach, including Ruben Amorim at Man United. He took over from Erik ten Hag, a man who had held the title of manager. Might come as a surprise that Amorim's appointment marked the first time ever that Man United had a head coach instead of a manager. But to understand why they made that decision, you also have to get what the difference is between a head coach and a manager. A manager's got a huge range of responsibilities. They're not just in charge of training and player lineups, they're also heavily involved in player sales and transfers. Critical stuff. But a head coach's role is far more focused on team training and performance on the pitch. So whereas Ten Hag was highly involved with decisions around transfers during his tenure, the intention was that Amorim wouldn't be, at least not on the same level. And as the sporting structure at Man United changed under Sir Jim Ratcliffe, people like Sir Dave Brailsford took charge of transfers instead. How all those roles play out in practice may be slightly different at different clubs though. On the other hand, the contracts of actual managers like Pep or Moyes had no limits on their job role and their involvement with transfers and contracts. But those guys are actually in the minority now, and it's a change that's happened pretty quickly. In 2019, there were only 6 head coaches in the Premier League, but by 2025, there were 14. A clear indication that more and more clubs are moving to...
Thank you, Andy, for those watching on smart TVs, YouTube, etc. He saved me from making myself look a complete wall there by doing exactly the same thing as I was once again grooving along to the music of the mighty Kraftwerk. Welcome back to the final hour of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. Later in the hour, we'll be joined by Alex Zonneveld to talk about the demise of Vitesse Arnhem. I mean, I can't believe it. I'm a club who's been in the top level of Dutch football all through my life, particularly as Dutch football was what absolutely obsessed me with the game. Their great club sides and their great national side of when I was a teenager is the reason why I'm still so nuts about the game today. And to see Vitesse Arnhem go to the wall and to watch their players walking out of the stadium in tears, some of them, has just been horrible. We'll talk about that. Andy will bring us all the latest from the qualifier for the Champions League, the Europa League and the Conference League. The Conference League, which is shaping up to be a brilliant competition next season. We'll also go around the leagues. But first and foremost here, as always, we must put the tin can and the piece of string right the way across the Atlantic and go over to Brazil to join our great friend from South America, Tim Vickery. Welcome back, everyone, to Trans Europe Express. And there, by the miracle of both audio and visual technology these days, I don't know how many satellites are involved in this or how much power is being used to bring Tim Vickery to our screens and into my ear holes. But there he is. Hi, Tim.
Very good evening to you. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Very good.
Good.
I'm sorry I missed you when you were over in London recently, but I could feel your vibes from 300 miles away, Tim. The Libertadores quarterfinals have been sorted. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the 8 quarterfinalists will be known come the end of Thursday our time. We've had the first round, the first leg ties last week, second legs this week. And I remember telling you that in the draw, Palmeiras of Brazil had done quite well for themselves because under a little bit of pressure after a disappointing Club World Cup, 1 or 2 elimination from the Brazilian Cup, but they're up against the side from Peru, Universitario, the first Peruvian side to reach this stage of the competition in nearly 15 years. And they were away from home in Lima in the first leg, and Palmeiras won 4-0. As the boxing commentators, especially in the US, like to say, this one is over. But the other 7 ties are very, very open indeed. And in fact, the other 7 ties, we had a grand total of 4 goals. It was very tight.
KG.
It wasn't an easy watch, and some of it was downright poor. We could have had more goals had Atlético Nacional of Colombia not missed 2 penalties and had 2 thunder back off the inside of the post at home to Sao Paulo of Brazil. So that one finished 0-0. If only Atlético Nacional of Colombia hadn't sold their star centre forward to the Brazilian second division, what might have happened? I hear you asking. So that one is on a knife edge. Another one which is very interesting to me, because I was in the stadium for the first leg. Defending champions Botafogo, now coached by the son of Carlo Ancelotti, David. They were at home to a team from Ecuador, Liga of Quito, or LDU. Now, Botafogo scored after 13 seconds and was second best for most of the rest of the game. It finished 1-0. The second leg coming up this Thursday is at the dreaded altitude of Quito. And David Ancelotti knows nothing of this.
No.
I've seen European coaches come badly unstuck. On the big example for me, in that very city of Quito, was Carlos Queiroz, the African-born Portuguese coach, who been all over Real Madrid, Man United. He was briefly in charge of Colombia, and that ended when they went down heavily at altitude to Ecuador. It's the only time I've seen a coach make of his own free will and volition 4 changes before half time.
Wow.
But if you don't have a plan for altitude, it's all over. So Ancelotti will have to do a lot of listening and learning.
Tim, I've obviously I've been across this idea that Bolivia particularly have virtually no stadiums below sort of altitude. Just factually, how high are these games being played?
Well, Quito is 2,800 meters above sea level.
Wow.
La Paz, Bolivia is 3,600. Now that really makes a difference.
You're up in the mountains, aren't you? Yeah, absolutely.
You're right up in the mountains. And Bolivia are now using an even higher stadium, right up where the airport is. So it's nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. Now
the airplanes have to go up to land. Yeah.
That's it. That's the one. Yes. I couldn't believe it when I landed in Ecuador. I thought, well, when are we coming down? And then suddenly we'd landed already. The technicalities of this is there's less oxygen in the air. And if you're unacclimatized, and anyone can acclimatize given 3 weeks, but who in the calendar of football has 3 weeks? You just can't run as much. You're gasping for air. So you have to change your game. And there's also the fact that the ball travels quicker through the air because there's less resistance, there's less oxygen, less resistance in the air. So it can be a nightmare for goalkeepers. Even though the goalkeepers aren't out of breath, the goalkeepers can be made to look very silly as well. So you've got to plan for it. You have to plan for the specifics of it. And it'll be interesting to see what Ancelotti Jr. Does for Thursday's game. Another one, 0-0 first leg. Libertad of Paraguay were at home to River Plate of Argentina. And getting on there for the last half hour, yes, there he is, Roque Santa Cruz, who yesterday turned 44 years of age.
Felicitations to the great man.
Indeed, yes. So hopefully he'll get another run out in the second leg at Buenos Aires, and who knows? Wouldn't it be a great story if he was to score the winning goal? I can't really see it. I think River Plate will go through. But if Roque was to score the winning goal that sends Libertad through to the quarterfinals, what a story that would be.
Tim, I wanted to ask you about a couple of these coaches. You mentioned David Ancelotti there. He really amazed people by turning up and speaking fluent Portuguese in the first press conference and talked about it being a matter of respect. Of course, given that the country has had issues with overseas coaches coming over, how much of a first impression was that? And how much credit will that give him if a couple of results go awry, and how he's been going generally? And another coach at the other end of his Brazilian journey that I wanted to ask you about. I was speaking to a Brazilian journalist yesterday, actually, about Abel and about Palmeiras. Now, I know you've compared him favourably with Jose Mourinho before. I mean, Palmeiras, again, going for it. They've been to the Club World Cup, didn't quite get as far as they wanted to. He's had a couple of titles beforehand. This Brazilian journalist was saying to me that Abel, of course, is arguably the greatest coach in the history of Palmeiras, which is no small thing. But that maybe he stayed a little bit too long. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I agree. It's so tiring. I mean, we got another. We got Leo Jardim, who's over here now, doing pretty well with Cruzeiro. He's only been here like 3 or 4 months, and he's already saying, "I can't take any more." He's already said, "I won't coach any other club in Brazil," and I'm already just burnt out by it because it's not only the number of games; it's the amount of travelling you have to do between games. So to stay 4 or 5 years in Brazil, as Abel has done, it's equivalent of 15 years somewhere else. And there is a feeling of the end of the party, I think. They didn't win a serious title last year. And they're out of the Brazilian Cup. They're okay in the league, but okay-ish. If they don't win the Libertadores, and I think he's clearly coming to the end. They've also gone out and spent quite a lot of money, and they've spent quite a lot of money on attacking players. He's got a lot of shiny attacking toys to play with, and I don't really think it's his game. I think he would rather cover up and grind his way out of results. On Ancelotti, yes, it was very impressive to see the Portuguese that he was speaking. Will that protect him? Not a bit. Not a bit.
No.
It's entirely results. I mean, for example, the Santos fans, hopefully we'll get to this in a minute, were calling today for Sampaoli, a little fella who's so successful with Chile, so unsuccessful with Argentina, has had a roller coaster of a career. He's been one of those Argentine coaches who's come in and just not bothered. And some of them just don't make the slightest effort to speak Portuguese. They'll just do everything in Spanish. And even so that the fans were calling for him. So it's an entirely results-driven thing. So Ancelotti Junior is going to have to grow up quickly, because he's got the job of a team that are the reigning Brazilian and South American champions. They don't have quite the money that they did when they achieved those things, but really the only way is down, and it's going to be difficult for him, I think, starting on Thursday with this game at altitude.
Tim, I'll come back to altitude in a little second, but I want to get through some of these stories because they're lovely. Fans of Manchester United will remember Marcos Rojo defending in the red shirt. Tell us about his current shirt and the issues with that.
Yeah, he debuted for his new club in the Libertadores for Racing in midweek. They went down 1-0 to Peñarol, and he was with Boca Juniors, but he's just left them and come to Racing, and that was his first game. And he can't have his surname on the shirt. Why is this?
Yeah.
Well, Racing, it's one of the fiercest and closest derbies in world history. Racing and Independiente. They're just on the same road, one next to each other. And so, the proximity plays a part in the rivalry. And Racing wear shirts that are a little bit like the national team of Argentina, light blue and white stripes. Independiente, their hated rivals, they wear, Danny, the dreaded red. Now, what does rojo mean in Spanish? It means red. Yes. So he's not allowed. The club will not let him.
Oh, that is too good.
Yeah, they won't let him be, Mark Red. He can't do it. So he's only Marcos, and sometimes an R, I think, on the back of his shirt, because there is no red. There is no red at Racing.
Of course, any pettiness in football I love, so that's really, really good. The other thing I love sometimes, I guess, is longevity. So tell me about the Fluminense goalkeeper, Fabio.
Yes, I was in the stadium on Saturday when he equalled Peter Shilton's record in the Guinness Book of Records, 1,390 professional games in goal. And he's going to break it on Tuesday night in a Sudamericana Europa League equivalent game. Now, Fabio is an amazing story. I mean, he's 44. He's not finishing anytime soon. He's got a contract with Fluminense now. It's extended to the end of next year, and he's doing it. And the amazing thing about him is he's been at the top level for all this time. He's never played for Brazil. He was backup keeper in the Confederations Cup in 2003.
Wow.
He was backup keeper he was World Under-17 champion in 97. He was backup keeper in the Copa America squad of 2004. He's been on the bench for a few friendlies, although not for many, many years, but he's never played for Brazil. And the well, personally, I think it would be great public relations from Carlo Ancelotti just to bring him on for the last few minutes of a game. But some would go further. Andy, you will well remember the name of Felipe Melo, the former Brazil midfielder, played in Italy, played in Turkey, until last year was playing in Brazil as a teammate of Fabio's. And Fabio had a terrific Club World Cup. And Felipe Melo actually went to social media to say, forget about the age, put him in the Brazil side. So not as a kind of charity thing, but because he's still extraordinary. He reminds me a little bit, the whole saga reminds me a little bit, Dan, of Clements and Shilton.
Right.
With him and Julio César, because they were contemporaries. And Julio César was the more physically built one. He was the Shilton.
Yeah.
Fabio is live. Reminds me a lot of Clements.
Right.
And so and Julio César, I used to think, because I watched them every week, one was for Vasco and one was Flamengo more than 20 years ago. And I used to think Fabio was the best of the two. But he just lost form and focus at a vital time. And Julio César got the move, to Inter Milan and so on, and went on to be a goalkeeper for a long time for Brazil. Although, given the way that his 2 World Cups ended up, he probably regrets some of that. But Fabio never quite got it. He was there and there. He's played for giant clubs now for years and years and years. But where, for England, it was Clements and Shilton alternating until Ron Greenwood went for Shilton, and then it was Shilton's for years. With Brazil, it was a conclusive win for the Shilton figure, Julio César, and Fabio never quite got his chance. But this is his revenge. As of Tuesday, he will be in the Guinness Book of Records as the player with most games, and he's going to add plenty more. And in part, so many games is a testament to just the amount of games that you play in top-class football,
of course,
in Brazil.
Tim,
but on and on he goes.
Tim, let me ask you one very quick one. Given that he was fantastic in the Europa League final, I'm talking about Richarlison now, given that he was excellent in the Super Cup final, given that he scored a worldie for Spurs against Burnley, is there any chance, if he keeps fit and plays well for Spurs, they get back into the Brazil squad?
Oh, yeah. Ancelotti loves him. And he called him up in June. Loves him. And very significant, Richarlison, who I think suffered enormously from 2021 when he played the Copa America and the Olympics. Never been the same player since. Richarlison himself was saying, going into the Burnley game, I've had a good pre-season for the first time in years. I'm ready and raring to go. Yeah, Ancelotti loves him. So this battle to be Brazil's number 9.
Of course he does, yeah. Of course he does.
Indeed, yeah. This battle. And Ancelotti, I think, at one point was seriously thinking about taking him to Real Madrid. So Richarlison is well in this fascinating battle to be Brazil's number 9.
Tim, it's always a pleasure, and it's been a joy tonight. Thank you so much indeed. Tim Vickery there, with all the latest from South America. Next, we'll be joined by Alex Zonneveld, another legend of Trans-Europe Express, to tell us about this. It is nothing, if nothing less, it's a terribly sad story. I also think it's a very illustrative story, the demise of Vitesse Arnhem in the Netherlands. the NFL returns to Wembley in October as the Los Angeles Rams take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've got a huge competition to win VIP tickets. That's right, we're giving you the chance to win 6 seats in a private box at Wembley Stadium with full hospitality plus $5,000 spending money. Here's how to enter.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word cash to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or enter for free by calling 0330 880 3338. All entries must be received by 25th August at 11 p.m. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. See talksport.com for terms and conditions.
Yeah, when we talk about Vitesse Arnhem, which we're about to do, this is not some club from the dark ages of football. This is a club that has been in Europe in recent times. In October of 2021, in the Netherlands, they beat Spurs by 1-0. I was at the second game. This is in the conference group stages. November 21, they lost 3-2 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Both sides got a red card. It was a fantastic game of football. Needless to say, the red card for Spurs, Christian Romero. But Vitesse Arnhem are no more. At least that appears to be the full extent of what's happened to them in the last few months, years and weeks. Joining us now to talk about this is our great friend of the show, of course, but also Netherlands football expert, Alex Zonneveld. Evening, Alex.
Good evening, Danny. Good evening, Andy.
Listen, you were in almost, you were in text terms, you were in tears about watching the players drift away from Vitesse Arnhem. Can you tell us what's happened, how we got to what we can describe as the downfall of Vitesse?
Yeah, this has kind of been a story made over the last 15 years rather than one that's blindsided us. It's kind of this idea of things creeping in over time and then suddenly exploding rather than it coming out of nowhere. So for a bit of context, Vitesse is one of the oldest clubs in the Netherlands. It was formed in, I think, 1892. It has a very large fan base, has averaged for the best part of 15, 20 years around 16,000 fans. They kind of, between the 50s and the 80s, drifted in the lower divisions, particularly the Dutch second division, what's called the Eerste Divisie. But from the 1990s, they had a real explosion, which caught the eye of a lot of Dutch football fans, but also a lot of European football fans. They did exceptionally well. They were regularly consistent in Europe, but they kind of established themselves as a top 6 proper Dutch outfit to rival Ajax, Feyenoord, etc.
Yeah.
Now, the trouble really starts in the early 2000s. And from 2000 to 2010, they have almost continual financial issues. They have to be bailed out 3 separate times, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, I think 2001, the sponsor pulls out and the municipal government bails them out. 2003, they have to find a new owner. 2008, there's more problems. And then you get to 2010, where they're actually kind of struggling towards the edge of the Eredivisie again, fighting relegation a little bit. And what happens next is something that a lot of people actually kind of hoped for their club at the time, is that a big, not Russian, but Georgian owner, but a big Eastern owner comes in with big pockets, which, from the Chelsea model, and at that time, it wasn't looked at in the same light as now. I mean, it might have been for a few people, but for a lot of people, it was ecstatic because a man called Merab Jordania comes in and he takes over the club. One of the first things he says is, the days of Vitesse in the mid-table is over. We are going to win the Eredivisie by 2013. And there are a few whispers at the time that he is linked with Roman Abramovich, but they're fairly quiet and they're swept aside. He immediately starts investing, putting money into the club. The club rise up the table. There's this partnership, which is going to become important, later established with Chelsea in 2010. And things start looking good. They get to a top 4 finish in 2012. In 2013, he rather unexpectedly sells the club, but he sells the club to Russian billionaire Alexander Chigrinsky. Excuse me, it is quite late. Chigrinsky. Yep. Alexander Chigrinsky, who is actually another business partner of his who had already been somewhat associated with the club. And Chigrinsky sort of continues from where they left off at Vitesse. They continue to invest more money, continue chasing that elusive title. But something interesting happens in 2015, where for the first time, Jordania, the first owner, comes out and says he was driven out because Roman Abramovich didn't want him there anymore. Roman Abramovich had been the real owner of the club. He says all of this in 2015, and he goes a step further. He actually says at that point, Vitesse weren't allowed to win the title because it didn't suit Chelsea's ambitions. Now, the KNVB, who are the Dutch FA, investigate at the time. They find no wrongdoing. They say nothing to see here. Vitesse are fine. No involvement from Abramovich. Nothing wrong with the partnership between Chelsea and Vitesse Arnhem. It's all above board. So fast forward another few years, things are going quite well with Chagrinsky. It's fine. And in 2018, he sells to yet another Russian billionaire called Valery Olf. So what's interesting is that in those 8 years, you've had 3 owners. They are all Russian or Georgian, but they're all from that part of the world. They all have very close links with Roman Abramovich, and they were all involved with the club in some capacity before they took over. But even still, there aren't really alarm bells. 2018, things carry on, and it's worth noting that actually 2017, they win the Dutch Cup. So this culmination of investment actually works to an extent. They never win the Eredivisie, but they win the Dutch Cup in 2017. And things aren't going brilliantly, but they're going relatively well. It's all seeming to go along. And it all changes in 2022, because in 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. And suddenly there is a torch shone on this murky underworld of Russian oligarchs in football. And almost immediately you see a response from especially Western Europe. Roman Abramovich has the club seized, Chelsea seized and sold off to Clear Lake, and that money is still, I believe, frozen and in escrow. But over in the Netherlands, there's not as much of an immediate reaction. Valery Olf basically says, I'm going to sell the club. And they say, OK, as long as you sell it. So by September 2022, he agrees to sell the club to a man called Coley Parry. And Coley Parry is an American owner of an investment company. They all say, oh, it's great. You know, it goes through pending KNVB approval, which can take some time. So he effectively takes over the running of the club, begins investing and actually loaning the club money. And they actually start, even in 2023, throwing money. But then in 2023, there's an investigation released from The Guardian in conjunction with the Journalism Investigative Bureau, which basically reveals the extent to Abramovich's meddling. It kind of uncovers what for a long time people had suspected, that Abramovich had been, they didn't know to what extent, but he'd been certainly, if not influencing the team, secretly funding Vitesse Arnhem.
Wow.
Between 2010 and 2016, they said he invested at least 116 million euros, which is a lot of money regardless, but it's more so when you imagine that Vitesse at that time had an annual turnover of around 15 million euros. So,
Alex, but right, so obviously the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia has brought all this to the surface. Why has nobody been found to save the club, and where are they today? They've lost their professional license, so presumably that's the end of them, really.
Well, so a lot of it comes back to Coley Parry, who takes over. This report comes out not long after that. They basically, the KNVB refuse to sanction the sale because they still think he's linked to Abramovich. They still think Abramovich is funding the club. So he then is forced to sell, but he's already been, in charge for 18 months. The club's in huge debt. A Dutch businessman called Gus Franke comes in the midst last year and essentially saves the club from the license being revoked last year. They said they were going to do this last year, revoke the title. Dutch businessmen step forwards. They say an agreement's reached, so they're not suspended. But again, Coley then reneges on this agreement.
I'm afraid we're running out of time. When we said get someone who can talk about Arnhem, you were the very man. The players have got no contracts now. What will happen? Will it go? And I'm needing 30 seconds here, Alex. Yes. Are they going to end up in the fourth or fifth tier or something?
Effectively, what has happened? They haven't been able to conclude a sale despite a last-minute takeover attempt. The interim chairman has stepped down. It's been revealed that the players will be allowed to leave should they find a new club. They're hoping to continue in the amateur divisions, but things are looking very, very bleak for Vitesse Arnhem as a professional club. The best hope is a Phoenix club now, or that they can remain as an amateur club by retaining their youth players.
In that big stadium, how very, very strange. A really horrible story, Alex, with some pretty shady characters involved as well, if I might say that. The victim, of course, is the fans of Vitesse who have built the club up over the past century and a bit. Thank you very much, Alex Zonneveld, with all the latest there from that story. Andy will now take us into the wider world of European qualifiers. No Arnhem, but we'll talk about the Champions League and particularly the Conference League in just a few minutes' time here on Trans Europe Express. to Alex Zonneville there for telling us all the latest from Vitesse Arnhem and that story. Andy, we're a bit squeezed for time, but that's okay. We'll do around the leagues in a little while. And meanwhile, the European tournaments are getting to the stage now where we're starting to sort out who will be getting into those group the draws for the big leagues, as they're called now, whatever they are, because that's coming up at the end of the month, 27th, 28th, around then. In the Champions League qualifiers, one tie roars into the eye line, doesn't it? Fenerbahce against Benfica. One of those is going out before the group stage.
Yeah, and despite the fact that Jose Mourinho's tried to play down the importance of the Champions League since he's arrived at Fenerbahce, it is huge for them. And of course, they've gone out and spent heavily on players again this summer. And Benfica have tried to be active in the market as well. We have to say that too. They got past Nice pretty easily over two legs. It wasn't as easy for Fenerbahce, but of course Fenerbahce were playing Feyenoord, who were in the last 16 last season. Lest we forget, they knocked Milan out of the competition before going out to Inter, and it wasn't easy for Inter at all. It was one of their hardest ties. So when they came back from the first leg in Rotterdam, 2-1 down Fenerbahce, and then they went a goal down before half-time, you thought, okay, they're in real trouble here. But they managed to keep their composure. John Duran got his first big goal for Fenerbahce. Yeah, speaking of composure, just before half-time. And then they held off a final comeback towards the end. Of course, Robin van Persie going back to his former club, having played for Fenerbahce. 5-2 in the end for Fenerbahce on the night, so they get through to this tie against Benfica. Funnily enough, their outstanding player, I thought, was an Englishman, Archie Brown, who turned down Milan to go away to Fenerbahce, play for Mourinho, and brilliant from left back in the week, sort of left wing back hybrid position, scoring a goal, setting up another couple. He's been very impressive in his early days at Fenerbahce. But of course, you know, these teams played each other going back 5-6 years in a Europa League semi-final as well. So it's got that real feeling of hard hitters. They both expect to be in the group stage.
Yeah, and it's a gigantic week for Scottish football, or week and a half for Scottish football, with not one, not two, but three teams hoping to qualify for the group stages of these tournaments. Celtic and Rangers in the Champions League, and Hibs in the Conference League.
Yeah, that's right. And look, Celtic, I think, have been hugely helped by the fact that because Scottish football and because Rangers actually have been so successful in Europe in recent years, it's added coefficient points, and all of a sudden the champions of Scotland don't have to start for the second qualifying round, which makes an absolutely massive difference for them. For Rangers, obviously, they've had to battle through a couple of rounds already. They were slightly helped by the fact that Vittoria Pilsen's best player, Pavel Schulz, went off to Lyon before they played, so that they were able to get through. And, you know, I'm sure they would have got through anyway, but it definitely helped them. But Club Brugge are tough. You know, they've done well in the Champions League in recent years. Serious team, well coached, with lots of experience as well. You're looking at Hans Vanaken, for example, who's still there. And Carlos Forbes was brilliant in the second leg of the game they played against Salzburg. It was a really satisfying game. So they're able to knock Salzburg, another ambitious team, out as well. But I'm just so invested in the Hibs story now. You're talking about the Conference League, of course. That they didn't quite get past Midtjylland, went out in the Europa League second round, qualifying on penalties, and then just about got past Partizan Belgrade, despite shooting themselves in the foot a couple of times before half time in the second leg at Easter Road. But what a brilliant atmosphere. Won it in extra time, recovered from going into extra time by conceding a goal right at the end of stoppage time. But really, as well as the atmosphere, the really compelling element of it, I think we've got a winner of the Puskás Award already. Kieran Bowie scoring a brilliant goal in the second half, 40-yard lob that went in off the inside the post. Now they've got Legia Warsaw coming up this week, and it'll be another absolutely huge atmosphere. This time they're playing the first leg in Edinburgh before going to Warsaw for the second the week after next.
Andy, let me stay then with the Europe's Celtic fringes. St Patrick's Athletic will not be qualifying for the Conference League, although when they were 2 up against Besiktas, it was on to be one of the greatest results ever by an Irish side. Now Besiktas are a huge team and came back and got it. When they were 2 up St Patrick's, there must have been a certain amount of fear. The story I want to draw your attention to, everybody, is the fact that I made great play on Hawksby and Jacobs when the Champions League qualifier started, that a team from the Northern Ireland and a team from the Republic got drawn against each other, Linfield against Shelbourne, and whenever sides from either side of the border meet, it is a huge event. In the event, neither of them qualify for the Champions League, and they have tumbled down through the qualifiers for the Europa League. And now, as I understand the draw, and because so many teams can't play each other because of national border disputes and all the rest of it, it is certain that in the qualifiers for the Conference League that's coming up, Linfield will play Shelbourne again. It's absolutely bonkers, but it is absolutely true. The upshot of that, at least one Irish team, they are Irish teams whether you like it or not, will be in the Conference League next year, which is a great progress for football north and south of the border. One more I want to draw your attention to, Andy, back in the, two actually, in that staying in the Europa League. Shakhtar lost to Panathinaikos in what was a meeting of big hitters in the qualifiers for the Europa League. So they've now fallen into the conference qualifiers. If they get through, I can see Shakhtar being a proper, they can make the latter stages of this tournament, where hopefully they'll meet someone like Crystal Palace. Yeah,
I mean, that would make it something really special. Of course, it's amazing to me that Palace are playing in the Conference League playoffs this week. I suspect they're feeling the same thing, but like with a little bit more regret and anger. But I mean, it should be easy enough against Fredrikstad, but it's just extraordinary that they're playing.
I want Palace to win this, given what's happened to them, Andy. I'll make no bones about it.
I can understand that, and I wish them the best of luck.
But you're connected. You have connections to Shakhtar, of course.
Yeah, and I think they were unfortunate not to go through. Arda Turan was slightly less unfortunate to get a red card for haranguing the referees, which means he won't be in either of those games against Servette, I suspect, in the playoffs. But yeah, if they get themselves into the group stage of the Conference League, it's still European competition for them. And as you say, European competition that they can genuinely win. They're just about to lose a really big player. Kevin, of course, is attracting a lot of Premier League interest. I mean, they said he was injured for the second leg of the game against Panathinaikos. I suspect they're protecting their investment a little bit, and quite understandably so. He's going to go for the thick end of 50 million, and they've already recruited his replacement.
I should make one more point, otherwise Lars Siversen won't talk to us. The progress that Bodo Glimt, semi-finalists, of course, in the Europa League last year, have made, or was it quarterfinals? I've now lost semi-final, wasn't it? Yeah, of course, against the mighty Spurs. They play Sturm Graz of Austria, and if they go through, they will be in the Champions League proper.
And you know what, Danny? They'll be the first Norwegian team in the Champions League proper for nearly 20 years.
Rosenborg. That's how much or someone like that?
Rosenborg, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that'll be it. So that is a sign of the progress that we've watched them making here on Trans Europe Express over the past 5-6 years. They could easily be a Champions League team in a few days' time. Thank you for all that, Andy. One thing left for us to do here on Trans Europe Express, that's to take you around the leagues as the leagues start to kick back into action. My goodness, is it already the second week, nearly the third week of August? Yes, it is. That's next here and final on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, just a few minutes left here on Trans Europe Express tonight, here on talkSPORT with me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Brassell. Now, there have been some very, very big stories around Europe during the last 2 months of the transfer window and all the rest of that. We've seen, Florian Wirtz going to Liverpool for a massive fee. Donnarumma, maybe the best goalkeeper in the world on his day, can't get a club. Many other stories. But, Andy, the big one has broken in the last 48 hours. Mauro Icardi, friend of this show, social media boulevardier par excellence, Giza is back.
Yeah, and he's had a tough year after, of course, doing his ACL against Spurs in the Europa League, going back to October last year. I think he might have had a few personal issues going on, though. I don't think anyone really knows about it. He's kept it under his hat quite nicely.
If only he would express what's going on in his personal life and not internalise it, or perhaps he'd be more mentally well.
Yeah, exactly. But finally made his return for the first team, set up by his great mate Lucas Torreira to get the third goal after coming on as substitute against Fatih Karagümrük, one of the other Istanbul clubs, one of the smaller Istanbul clubs on Friday night. 3-0 win for Galatasaray. So lovely, comfy opening to the season for them. Still remarkable. I know we've talked about the changing demographic of the signings to the Turkish Super League so much in recent months, maybe over the last year. But to see Galatasaray going into a game with a substitutes bench, and obviously it's because they're at various levels of fitness, of substitutes bench of Osimhen, Icardi and Zaniolo, all of whom ended up on the pitch, is quite remarkable. Of course, Fenerbahce not lacking in star power. A bit more difficult for them. They had their opening game postponed, of course, because of that game against Feyenoord in the Champions League, which is capital to them and capital to Turkish football as well. And they looked a bit tired, I thought, actually. They were really lacking energy away at Göztepe. Göztepe, who lost their star striker, their big guy, Romulo, the Brazilian, he went to Leipzig as the replacement for Benjamin Šeško this week. But they played really well, I thought, Göztepe. They made it difficult for Fenerbahce. They never looked like winning it in a million years. And then they got a penalty in stoppage time, a fair penalty, it must be said. Maybe a little bit soft, but definite penalty. Anderson Talisca took it, and Talisca missed it as well. So they got away from that with a 0-0 draw. You kind of have that feeling because the points totals have been so high, a little bit like Atletico Madrid tonight as well. There's something that's really going to hurt a lot. But you know what? It could have been worse, because we talked about John Duran earlier, and you talked about John Duran being slightly combustible. He gave a centre-half an elbow and he only got booked for it. He's really, really fortunate. And as we kind of touched on last week, because it's such an intense club and because John Duran is such an intense, like, boom or bust sort of player, I'm fascinated to see how it's going to go. Slight bit of pressure off Ole Gunnar Solskjaer elsewhere as well. I mean, they played Elfsborg tonight in the late game, took the lead through a Tammy Abraham penalty, started very, very well there, conceded an equaliser. Rafa Silva with a brilliant winner, spinning his defender and smashing it into the top of the net in the 96th minute. I mean, really, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is living very dangerously in the last week.
When he was 2 down at St Patrick's Athletic, he was certainly living dangerously.
Well, honestly, Danny, I thought he could be the first coach, even in Turkish history, to be fired at half-time at that point. They've definitely been lining a few other people up. I don't think it's a case of if, but when. But let's see. Let's hope he hangs on.
Yeah, running out of time, Andy, so let's move on to Portugal, where Sporting... I wonder how much Ruben Amorim wishes he was back at Sporting. They were playing tonight.
Yeah, they were. And again, a very, very strong start to the season for them. 6-0 win over Aroca last night. Goals for the new signings. A couple of goals for Trincao, of course, who's been linked with a move away. But a couple for the new guys, Ricardo Mangas, who has arrived to play wide left from Guimarães, very, very talented player. And Luis Suarez getting a couple as well. Not that Luis Suarez, the Colombian one, used to play for Marseille, Almeria. He's the de facto replacement for Victor Gyökeres. So great start to the season for them. Porto playing tomorrow night, of course, another team who've spent heavily this window.
Yeah, well, we heard the downside of the Eredivisie with Alex's report on the Demise. the very complicated demise of Vitesse Arnhem. Their Liga started as well. And Ajax, who themselves have not been slow in the transfer market, not off to an ideal start either.
No, really not. And a drop in their first points under John Heitinger today. 2-2 draw away at Go Ahead Eagles. I mean, that may sound like a really bad result, but we've got to remember Go Ahead Cup winners last season. So a huge deal for them. But Ajax have looked clunky. And I guess like a lot of these teams that we're talking about, it feels like they're still doing pre-season. Now for Ajax, of course, that wasn't because they were involved in the Club World Cup, but because they took a while to appoint Heitinger, because there's been some turnover. You look at Oscar Gluck, who I think will be great for them. He's coming from Salzburg, coming on sub today. And then you have Ko Itakura, the centre-back, really struggling to adapt a little bit and coming off with a little bit to go in that game. So a lot to go for them. Now, PSV, of course, despite the loss of Luke de Jong and Malik Tillman, still really look the part. And again, I get the feeling they're constantly trolling me. You had Alassane Player saying this week the philosophy of Peter Bosz was what made him choose the club, and it's known all over Europe what a great coach he is and all the rest of it. I mean, to have a former Lyon youth player saying that, it feels like he's targeting me personally. But either way, PSV getting another comfy win away at Twente, and they're the uber favourites again, despite the fact that Robin van Persie's Feyenoord won this weekend after that European Cup loss. They look really good, I think.
So, Andy, we've got about 90 seconds before I have to start winding up, and I deliberately left this spot, and I didn't warn you about it. Domestically, in the clubs that you support, or in England, or in Europe, the season is up and running again now. Well, there really hasn't been a break, has there? But the season is officially up and running. What are you most looking forward to over the next few months or 9 months in European or domestic football?
Really, to see what the back end of the Champions League looks like. I don't mean the back end in terms of the knockout phases, but I think the bottom of the group stage, because the group stage was a bit of a shot in the dark last season. I don't think clubs really knew what was the sort of number they would need to get through in the top 8 or the top 24. It'll be interesting to see if it's as exciting this season, because now clubs really know what that magic number is. It's a bit like 40 points in the Premier League. Although
10 in the old group stages of the Champions League, yeah.
Yeah, you don't really need 40 points anymore. No. And I think when you look at the teams who are coming through the playoffs, I think there could be some pretty strong teams at the bottom. So maybe it could be even more even and even more exciting this year if you're getting Fenerbahce, for example, and some of those going through.
Yeah, when you look at the teams that are in pot 3, you think, wow, this competition is going to be murder this year. Andy, it's been a joy to have you back. It always is, of course. Thank you very much for being with us. Let me remind you that I've got a very busy schedule this week. I'm sitting in for Paul Hawksby from 1 till 4 on the legendary Hawksby and Jacobs show over the whole week here on talkSPORT. Please try and join us from 1 o'clock till 4. We'll have some great guests and we'll have a bit of a laugh as well. In our poll tonight, majority of you felt that Donnarumma would end up at Manchester City. Coming up next here on Trans Europe Express is My Sporting Life with the great Jurgen Klinsmann. That's all from us for now. Don't forget to listen to our podcast. Thank you all for listening. God bless you all. And good night.